Honorable members, when this House suspended for the break, we were debating a compendium of bills. I believe that we are ready to presume. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Fox Hill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to now move the National Honors Amendment Bill 2022. And in doing so, I wanted to first recall that yesterday, the 22nd of March, would have been the 92nd birthday of the late Sir Lyndon Pinley, who was the founding Prime Minister of our country. And I started there quite apart from the fact of the anniversary in my view that it should, in fact, be a public holiday in the same way that Errol Barrow Day is a holiday in Barbados as a recognition of the founder of the country. But it's an appropriate place to start because what we're dealing with today, national honors, is something of an intangible nature. It's what I call part of statecraft. And a parliament rarely has the opportunity to deal with statecraft 50 years on from independence, because you would have thought that all of the work has been done. It's also an appropriate place to start because the member for West Grand Bahama had shown me a speech made by Sir Lyndon Pinley in which he said that we would continue to use the British honors until such time as we had honors of our own. And somewhere around 1989, 1990, a few of us, Terence Bethel in particular, the late Terence Bethel, Loretta Butler Turner, myself, Father Sebastian Campbell, and then others joined like Reverend C.B. Moss, Freddie Munnings, Vanda Moss. We all joined together in something called the National Heroes Day Committee. It started off largely as an attempt to observe the anniversary of the passing of the late Sir Milo Butler, which was the 19th of January, 1979, and then morphed into the whole question of a National Honors Day, National Heroes Day, and the question of national honors. And then we also worked on the question of the 10th of January and Majority Rule Day. So we accomplished all of those. We got the Majority Rule Day. Sir Arthur Folkes was Governor General at the time, and there was a public ceremony to confirm that fact. And then afterwards, National Heroes Day. So I want to thank the former Prime Minister, Perry Christie, for leading the government to cause all of these things to be done. And I said, this is an intangible thing, this business of statecraft, because these things are designed really to say thank you to those who have given service to the country. And they've come to mean a lot. I know that I've spoken, for example, to Bill Swain, who is one of the leading citizens of Abaco. And he's very troubled by the fact that all of his adult life has been spent in contributions to the civic life of the country. And he's not been conferred with one of these honors. And part of the reason this amendment is being done is because there was a lacuna in the original bill, or the original act, which did not cover those persons who are known in their communities. The British honors have something called the Queen's, the British Empire Medal, I think is what it's called, BEM. And there's also the Queen's Certificate and Badge of Honor. And these are two honors which go largely to community-based individuals. So There are various grades of these, starting from a knighthood, and the Governor General, for example, receives the Grand Cross of St. Michael and St. George, or if the sovereign visits the country, you get Grand Cross of the Victorian Order. And then if the other designation is Knight Commander of Michael and St. George, and then you go down CMG and CBE. CMG is the Order of St. Michael and St. George, and CBE is Commander of the British Empire. And then you have OBE, which is officer, and then you have MBE, which is member. Of course, there is no more British Empire, except for Bermuda, Montserrat, and the British Virgin Islands. I think that's all that's left these days. The Turks and Caicos, forgive me. So the whole thing seems a bit anomalous for Bahamians to be receiving, in their years of independence, the British Empire Medal and an OBE or CBE, as the case might be. But there are still many of our citizens to whom this has some authenticity and relevance. So when the original bill was designed, Act was passed, we did not abolish the British honors, but allowed the system to remain in parallel, and instead made a policy decision that we would not, except for the level of Governor General, Chief Justice, confer any of these honors, and also knighthoods generally. But apart from that, the local honors were supposed to replace the British honors. There is now a debate again, because as you hear from the Reverend Sebastian Campbell, who is the chair of the National Heroes Day Committee and one of those who's responsible for this legislation coming to Parliament, saying that as long as we have this parallel system, people are going to choose the old system as opposed to the new system. And so therefore we ought to make the decision to abolish it. We don't have that consensus in the government, but it is to be preferred. The local system is to be preferred. And it is our view that there are additional amendments which have to be made to this act, which would give additional value and authenticity to the honor system of honors. Yesterday, as I said, was the birthday of, would have been the 92nd birthday of Sir Lyndon. And his widow, Dame Marguerite, attended a memorial which we, the Progressive Liberal Party, held to commemorate his birth yesterday. And it was also an opportunity to talk about, again, the question of statecraft and the building of a state, and to tie people to these intangibles. I think of the many American diplomats, for example, who I go to receptions where they are, and they wear proudly the medals which they've obtained from their foreign service. We put in place foreign service medals as well before we left office, but they've not been administered for 4.5 years. But people find value in these medals and honors because it affirms the work and value which they've done toward building up the institutions which they work for and in which they are employed. So today we are being asked to amend the law, and it comes also at a propitious time because there is a, I want to say, nascent debate, maybe that's the word, about whether the monarchy still obtains, and there's a lot of pressure being put on me to get dragged into an argument about whether or not we should have a royal visit or not. I'm actually quite confounded by it in a way because I say if you want to be rationally consistent, you just have to read the Constitution you have. And so, if that's the Constitution you have, and every time you want to try and change the Constitution, there's a big row over it. So, you got the Constitution you got. And even though people call Elizabeth the Queen of England, she's in fact the Queen of the Bahamas and the head of state. So, in a constitutional sense, these aren't visitors at all. They are actually coming home in the constitutional sense. And since you got them, you got to pay for it. That's the system you have. If you don't want it, then you're free also to get rid of it. That's the system we have. And so the other thing is the press was asking me about, well, what about these demonstrations? And, you know, two groups I think have applied for demonstrations during the visit. Well, you know, this is a free and democratic state. So provided the demonstrations are within the law, and I have no doubt they would seem straightforward enough, there's no issue with demonstrations either. I'm sure the couple themselves are worldwide, and so a demonstration isn't going to be a huge issue. In fact, I recall when John, I can't recall because it's too little to remember, but anyway, I was told by Dr. Eugene Newry, he was part of the NCPA in 1963 when John Kennedy came here, the only sitting US president. And as he was going into the gates in Life Key where he lived, the NCPA had a demonstration outside the gates. And he told me Kennedy stopped, wanted to know who they were, why were they demonstrating. And in fact, Kennedy actually stayed here a week, I'm told, and in fact invited them to lunch to talk about what it was they were doing. So demonstrations are part of the fabric of our democracy. So that's how that works. So we have our own orders now. And I would like to explain the regime of the act. So the decisions are made, like with the British honors, the decisions are actually made by the cabinet. The way it says, it's on the advice of the advisory committee to the prime minister, who advises the governor general, who the governor general is the chancellor of all of the orders and their various orders. The members of the present committee are myself as chair, the member for St. Barnabas, I gather, is the nominee for the opposition. Commander Granville Adderley from the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, Assistant Commissioner of Police Delarice Ferguson from the Royal Bahamas Police Force, Dr. Keith Tinker, who is nominated by the Prime Minister in consultation with the leader of the opposition as a historian, Ms. Constance MacDonald, nominated by the Prime Minister in consultation with the leader of the opposition for the Northern Bahamas, Ms. Anita Colley, nominated by the Prime Minister with the leader of the opposition for the Southern Bahamas, Mr. Francis Kerry, nominated by the Prime Minister in consultation with the leader of the opposition for the Central Bahamas, Mrs. Tamika Lundy, nominated by the Council of the University of the Bahamas. And we're still awaiting the appointment by the Chief Justice to fill out the committee. Oh, I see. You haven't been consulted. Yeah, it can only go by the brief. I could write you a letter now, except I don't have the job.
He just briefed you.
I'm sorry. I was
He just kept me.
Yeah. So that obviously that lacuna has to be corrected. Here are the orders. Order of National Hero, Order of the Nation, Order of the Bahamas, Order of Excellence, Order of Distinction, Order of Merit, and the Order of Lignum Vitae. And then there will be Distinguished Service Medals for citizens of the Bahamas in recognition of the exceptional service in the public service or civil society. And then there are badges of honors for persons in civil society who perform exceptional service to the Bahamas, and medals for bravery undertaken in the Bahamas by any person. And it is that last set, the Distinguished Service Medals, the Badges of Honor, and the Medals for Bravery, that these amendments are meant to cure. Because we'd been trying to do this. I served on the last committee under the chairmanship of the then member for Fort Charlotte, Mark Humes, and we were trying to make recommendations in these categories, but never could do so because the law did not allow it. So we're hoping that now this resolves that problem. And there's already a notice out from the committee to take nominations from the public. The form for these forms can be found on the government's website, bahamas.gov.bs. The deadline is the 8th of April, 2022, and you can submit those applications over to the Cabinet Office, which is across the street. Let's go through. So, as I say, the advisory committee then advises the Prime Minister. And the way the orders are, they go from highest to lowest. So, Order of National Hero is the highest, and this can be awarded posthumously as well. And then Order of the Nation, which is one which is conferred automatically on the Governors General and the Prime Ministers. And then Order of the Bahamas, which is for most citizens the highest order that most citizens can get. And Order of the Bahamas carries with it the title Right Honorable. So I believe that Reverend Philip Ramming, for example, was conferred with Order of the Bahamas and therefore carries the title Right Honorable. And when the amendments are brought into force, they will do the following. First of all, Clause 2 will define what civil society means. So it includes charities, charitable persons, international organizations with humanitarian objectives, non-governmental organizations improving health, education, and the standard of living in the Bahamas. And public service includes government ministries, full and quasi-government departments, units, and other entities, public and private corporations, wholly or partially owned by the government. And then Clause 3 says that Section 5A of the Principal Act is amended. That's it seems to me like a grammatical issue because it does not say, it should read Society of Honor. I think it leaves out the word Society of. And then Clause 5B repeals and replaces subsections 2, 3, 4 of 5 as follows, so that each of the societies referred to in subsection 1 shall be governed by regulations made by the Governor General. And 3, there shall exist a hierarchy among the orders in order in which they are listed. So I just gave you the order in which they are listed, and so they will rank from highest to lowest. So, for example, if you were trying to find an equivalent in the British honors, you would say that Order of the Bahamas is equivalent to Knight Commander of St. Michael and St. George. That would put them on that level. So, Clause 4, the Principal Act is amended by saying a new 5A, 5 big A, capital A, there shall be awarded by the Chancellor, who's the Governor General, on the recommendation of the Advisory Committee, distinguished service badges and medals in honor of service by Bahamians serving in the public service, and distinguished service badges for exceptional service by members of civil society, and medals of bravery. And then the Chancellor has, in his absolute discretion, the ability to award medals of honor for long, valuable, or exceptional service to the Governor General, his spouse, or the vice-regal household, which is worthy of special recognition. Now, the first time I knew that something like this existed in the British honors was I used to work for the Bahamas Information Services, and Cyril Stevenson was then the director of Bahamas Information Services. And he was the former member of the House of Assembly, one of the founders of the Progressive Liberal Party. And he was the person who organized the press relations for the royal visit of 1977. And afterwards, as the Queen came here, lived on Britannia, which was then her yacht. And afterwards, the last day of the visit, there was a reception given as by the Queen as a farewell, which I must say I respectfully declined. I was a contrarian even then. But I had lots of messages. You know, Loftus Roca is a very well-known monarchist, right? And, no, you were working, were you working? Ness, yeah. So, you know, there's this committee the Queen came here to read the speech from the throne. So this is a big deal. And for Mr. Roca, who's my very good friend, I mean, he was teasing me to no end. Said, well, you all fellas for the Republic can be very sad for the next few days. So anyway, he was very excited because he had been chosen as part of the committee of the House that went to say to the Queen, the House is ready to receive you. So this is a very exciting day for him. And but after this farewell reception, I was in, I think it's not Curry House, it's the other one, the little house where the AIDS Foundation now is. But that used to be the Information Services. So I was sort of walking out of the office, and I met Mr. Stevenson packing away things in his car. And he was almost tearful because he had received an honor from the Queen, which was, I think it was a Lieutenant of the Victorian Order. And I learned that this was a personal award, which is given by the sovereign for personal services to her on occasions of this nature. So he got to carry the post-nominal LVO. And this is a very proud moment for him. And so I'm just trying to demonstrate to people that, and maybe this may not mean a lot to younger people, but that as you mature in your engagement in public life, it comes to mean something very important for you to go to Government House and be conferred with one of these honors. Again, my mother got Queen's Certificate and Badge of Honor. And if you went in our living room, she had it hanging up in the living room. So I had to become mute on the point. It was important to her. My father, during the Queen's visit, Sir Gerald Cash was then the Governor General. And when I came home after the visit was over, he was in a foul mood. So I asked him what happened. And he said, you know, all these years, Gerald Cash and I have been friends. And he passed me straight without introducing me to the Queen. These things are important. so I have to be respectful. Yeah. Bless them all. Anyway, so we are where we are. And I believe that I talked about statecraft and how we are developing as we go along. And so this is part of the development of where we're going. Next step is, at some point, I think we have to simply abolish the British honors. And I think the next step, or in parallel to what we're doing, we did before we left office in 2017 decide, and Mr. Ken Dorset, who was then the minister, set aside the land on the eastern side of the Botanic Gardens, starting at the top of the hill, go down to the next road. I think it's called Dunmore or Infant View. But the whole eastern flank of the Botanic Gardens is to be the spot designated for National Park. And I got this idea because I visited Istanbul, And if you go there, and it's a wonderful city, if you get the opportunity to visit the monument which is created for Ataturk, who is the founding leader of Turkey in the early 20th century when the Ottoman Empire had collapsed and Turkey was being reframed. So the secular state that he created, he was really lauded for his work in creating this new Turkish state. And it's just a magnificent monument to the founder of their country. I'm not sure he's in such good stead these days with the Islamic party back in power. But the point is that I got the idea that you ought to have a statue of the founder of our country at the top of Fort Charlotte, which overlooks the island. And then those others who are in the pantheon of heroes would, in descending order, be part of the national park. Beautiful. And so, as is my practice, I wanted to nationalize these ceremonies because the birthday of Sir Lyndon has always been celebrated by his widow and those of us who knew him and those of us who are his party supporters at his mausoleum. But I said to my younger colleagues, two of them in particular who are now senators, Senator Barry Griffin and Senator Quinton Lightbourne, that I took them to the park and showed them the park. And I said, now, long after I'm gone, if this never is done, it's your job to take things to the next level, because that's where we wanted to go. And so it is important for these kinds of lessons to be passed on to the next generation, because statecraft is a continuous exercise. And as you see, you're constantly fighting to maintain your identity, to maintain your authenticity, your legitimacy. It is a constant battle. When I was a university student, we used to say at public rallies, a luta continua, which means the struggle continues, and it continues every day. I used to even go to John McCartney's meetings, and they used to always end their meetings by saying, dare to struggle, dare to win. Yeah. Never quite got there, but it was, yeah. So that's where we are. And that's what the bill is designed to do. It also, there is a problem as well. I say problem because the facts often change things anyway. But we decided when the bill was originally passed to make the announcement on Independence Day and to confer the awards on National Heroes Day. And there's a reason for that. The reason is that when you're paralleling or mirroring the British honors, because remember now, when you are transferring or morphing into a new generation or trying to revolutionize things, and you see this with Christianity, of course, because Christianity adopted many of the pagan symbols and rituals as it was morphing from pagan religion into Christianity. Sam Huntington, who wrote a book called Political Order in Changing Societies, talks about the American Revolution and says how, even though it was a revolution in the sense that they broke from Britain, when you look at the US Constitution, it is in fact designed exactly like the British government was in the years of George III. And literally he was arguing that all they did, in a sense, was just substitute president for king. But they set up the institutions almost the same. So, and you saw under Trump how powerful the office of president actually is. In the same way when you had an more or less absolute monarchy in Britain. So I'm saying this, in adopting then the new model of honors, to add legitimacy and authenticity to the awards, one, we wanted to make sure that it was vested in the Governor General, so that Government House and the symbolism of Government House was always engaged in the award. It is a big deal for people to go to Government House. Secondly, Independence Day, the British honors are awarded on two occasions, on New Year's and the Queen's birthday. So the Queen's birthday is in June, and the New Year's Day is obviously New Year's Day. So we wanted to have a date fixed, and fixed with something that had to do with our national identity. So we chose Independence Day as the day on which the awards would be announced. So that's the deadline that we're working toward. And then we said, since National Heroes Day was going to replace what was then Discovery or Columbus Day, as the second Monday in October, that instead of nothing happening or at another day at the beach, we would make an official ceremony conferring the awards on National Heroes Day. So that's the reason we chose to do that. But then you have exigencies like a storm comes bearing down on you 2 days before or on the day itself, and it can't take place. So what does that leave you with? It leaves you with no lawful possibility to change the conferment date or to change the announcement date. So Clause 5 is making it possible for the Chancellor or the Governor General in certain circumstances to be able to change those dates. And then in Clause 6, it says the Chancellor, on the advice of the Advisory Committee, may by notice in the Gazette, where the conferment or badge has been announced but has not yet been conferred, can cancel the award or revoke a badge or medal where the person conferred with the badge or medal is convicted of an offense under the laws of the Bahamas or any other country, or behaves in a manner that is inconsistent with the purposes of this award. So the award can, in certain circumstances, be revoked. Again, I remember this wasn't a revocation, but John Lennon and the Beatles, much to the consternation of the older generation at that time, were given MBEs by the Queen, and the establishment was outraged at the time. But John Lennon eventually turned his back in because of some decision. I think it was the British supporting the Vietnam War or some such. So that's a case where they turned it back in. I've not heard of a revocation in Britain. And then it's an offense, it says, if you don't turn it back in after it's been revoked. And then it appears there's a tidying up exercise in Article 7 to correct a typographical error. So that's what this bill is seeking to do. I want to foreshadow, I believe is the word, an amendment which also, it's self-explanatory. So in the committee stage, I'd be offering this amendment to Section 7 of the Principal Act by the insertion of a subsection 5 to provide for the following, notwithstanding subsection 1, where any honor or award is to be conferred upon the Governor General, such honor or award shall be conferred by the upon the Governor General by the Chief Justice. So the Chief Justice did the honor the last time with the present Governor General, but we want to make sure that that's done in law to provide for that. That, in summary, is the policy behind this, some of the history behind where we are at. And so I commend the bill to the House, and I so move. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Is there a seconder? The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Fort Charlotte.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on behalf of the people of Fort Charlotte, It is my privilege to second this bill. And before I commence my remarks, very brief remarks, on the substance of the bill, I just wish to recognize one of the heroines of Fort Charlotte, Miss Effie Smith Sawyer. You will find her photograph on the Wall of Fame at the Princess Margaret Hospital from 1954 to 1980. As a nurse, a registered nurse, she ministered to generations of Bahamians in the Princess Margaret Hospital and also in the community of Fort Charlotte. A member of St. Agnes Church, a mother who raised a very distinguished family, and who, Madam Speaker, who could walk with queens and kings, and a queen she was, but also maintain the common touch. On Baldwin Avenue, where she resided right up until her death, you could find her sometime in the evening sitting on the wall, talking to the young people. She understood, Madam Speaker, that this issue of crime is multidimensional. It's not only the police's problem, it is all of us who call ourselves members of this society. We have a role to play. And she played her role through Baldwin Avenue, ministering to young people, befriending young people, counseling young people, feeding not only those in her house, but those within her community. So I wish to extend love and sympathy to her family and to the community of Baldwin Avenue, because we have lost a heroine. The honorable member from Fox Hill spoke about statecraft. And the question is, who are we? Who are we as a people, as a civilization, and now since 1973 as a nation state? Who are we? And I would venture to say, Madam Speaker, that all of us who call ourselves Bahamians, we share certain values, attitudes, common history, which cross race, and we all have assumed and have inherited an identity. And that identity, Madam Speaker, represents hundreds of years of people humanizing this space that we call the Bahama Islands and now the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And we are all the beneficiaries of the struggle and the sacrifice. And I'm not just talking about the Africans who were brought here as slaves, and also free Africans whose descendants constitute the community of Fox Hill, Adelaide, and Gambia. I am talking about the first people who inhabited and humanized these islands, the Lucayans. We don't even know their name, but they are part of our history. They're part of the long history of the civilization that evolved within this community. And then, of course, you have the African and the Europeans, all humanizing, some coming from the Carolinas, bringing the grits and the other practices and cultural attributes that shape, inform the Bahamian civilization. Some coming from Bermuda. And also, we cannot forget the Native American people, the Seminole, who came fighting, as Bob Marley said, for survival, right? Confronting General Custer, the original people of the Americas, and finding refuge in Andros, in Red Bays. All of that is who we are, Madam Speaker. They all shape the genes that run through our veins. Native, indigenous, I know the word indigenous has been used in this house before, but I'm talking about the real indigenous people, the first people for these islands. And all of us ancestors who came, some involuntarily, some running from war, some seeking religious freedom, all shaping. And we know that as we go back, it isn't so long that many of our ancestors were slaves, and there is also that struggle for human freedom and the name of Pompey. You see, because the bill that the honorable member of Fox Hill as an advocate for long before he came into this house, this bill allows posthumous award or conferment of national hero or some other designation. What about Pompey? Enslaved, and says, no, I'm not going to Cat Island because it is convenient for the planter. My field is here, my family here, and I am going to stay here. And takes a boat from Exuma and comes to New Providence to make petition. And there is an interesting parallel, Madam Speaker, between Pompey and 100 years later, during the Burma Road, and the Bahamian workers on the Windsor field, who are working and doing the same work as their American white counterparts, but paid 50% less. And they walk to Bay Street with the chant, I is man. It's the same thing Pompey was saying. I is man. Interpreted today, I am a human being, and my race, my color, doesn't define the degree of humanity, because my humanity is equal to any other person. So you see, when we talk about who we are talking about this long period of survival of human society in these islands, informed by waves of different people at different times, and having to cohabit together in one society, some parts more equal than others, but yet having to cohabit and find a glue to define all of us as being Bahamians. And this is why this act and the amendments today is raising some fundamental questions, because when this bill was passed as a result of lobbying and long struggle by the civil society and the political directorate being convicted to bring this bill, we're talking about what it represents not only today, but what it represents with respect to our past. And the point I now wish to focus on is what does it require of us? And it requires of us, Madam Speaker, to first recognize that we stand on the shoulders, and the shoulders of not only our African ancestors, but also our European ancestors. Because when you look at the 1950s, the Bahamas had seasonal tourism, primarily agriculture and fisheries. And there was quite a significant, we focus on the civil struggle and the political struggle, but also economically. It was a period of tremendous transformation to year-round tourism. Are we to recognize any of those persons who led that transformation? Then when we look at the struggle for majority rule, we certainly recognize Sir Lyndon, who led the party of which the majority party today. But we also have persons in this society who made such extraordinary contribution. And I'm thinking about H.W. Brown from the church, who carried the struggle in our worship spaces and said that this struggle is equivalent to the struggle of the children of Israel, and that this had the kind of righteous legitimacy, irrespective of the fact that the laws of the land said that you could only vote if you had property, and we know most of the property were in the hands of a few white merchants and a few black persons. But yet these prophetic voices imbued the majority struggle of the people with biblical legitimacy. And that helped to fuel the struggle for majority rule. And we know that in every island, pastors whose names we don't know were doing the same thing in their communities, standing up every Sunday. We know that lodges, fraternal organization, and sororities were doing the same thing as they met and as they carried out their rites and going to convention, talking this liberation theology, I would call it, this liberation message. All of these people, and then of course, Madam Speaker, we often look the suffragists, the women who up until 1962 couldn't vote. Even if they had property, couldn't vote. And we know that women such as Althea Mortimer would have small groups of people and talk about the UN Convention, talk about the Charter of Rights, talk about the Bible, talk about sources of knowledge that will raise the consciousness of the women of this society. And those women came also, like Eugenia Simonet from the Progressive Liberal Party, as well as people like Miss Ingram, who came, Mary Ingram, from the UBP. In other words, the struggle for majority rule led, fueled by persons from the civil society and Mabel Walker, coming here as an American, married to a Bahamian. But she, whatever we did over the hill, she did. She lived like us, worked with us, and was part and parcel of this struggle for women, the right to vote, and also for majority rule, caring for our people. And what about all of these different churches providing schools? Madam Speaker, could you imagine in the 1960s, in this whole colony, Bahama Islands, one public high school? Could you imagine? You know, like I think it's Bougie Banton say, those who could run will run, but what about those of us who had to stay? Madam Speaker, I grew up, I mean, one love. Okay, anyway. So, Madam Speaker, what we see here then is that, for us, for people like me growing up in Baintown, the eldest of 12 children raised by a single mother, there are many days, Madam Speaker, I had to go up to the Catholic Church, St. Francis, and get a tin of cheese and some powdered milk from the priests and the nuns to take home to my mother and, my siblings. Many of us didn't have the opportunity to go to schools that we couldn't afford. In other words, Madam Speaker, there are so many people who open the doors for me from our civil society. And this is why this amendment is being made. We cannot pretend that the history of this society was built only by politicians. That in all of our islands, people nourish, cared, supported us. And what is interesting, Madam Speaker, is that one of the things that Dorian demonstrated to us, and I saw it with my own eyes, sometimes the government gets paralyzed. You may be living on an island and you bragging all over the place, say, boy, we have a national airline and it has our emblem on it and so on. But what about the people in Abaco? Lost everything. Eventually makes it to the airport. And you're looking around, you don't get no money. Everything gone. The only thing you have on you is your clothes. And you there with your children, with your auntie, with your uncle, and you helping them. And you are there waiting for whatever touchdown on the ground. You have to be begging and pleading. Could I get a ride, please? Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker. It is the civil society mailboat. You know how I had to get my brother and his wife out of Abaco? I had to beg someone from the civil society. His wife, disabled. A daughter who is disabled. I have to ask a client, mailboat, please help me get my van. Madam Speaker, this is the Bahamas in the 21st century. Civil society. I had to go to Bastian, And he chartered a plane to bring my niece out of Abaco. And the national airline, when it was going there, charging people to be rescued in a national disaster. And it was only with the outcry of the society. But you see, who could run would run, but what about those who have to stay? It was the civil society who came to the rescue of our brothers and sisters in harm's way. And this is why, as we redefine what is a national hero, what about the guys on the jet ski? We have this big infrastructure, and we say we have these big trucks. And when the trucks go through the water, it stalls. Or you say we have the big tractor, and the tractor gets stalled. The jet ski, these same jet ski operators had to go and take people off the rooftop of their buildings. What is a hero? Who is worthy of a national honor? Madam Speaker, the jet ski operators who risked their lives and saved many of our people have yet to be given an honor. Well, the kind of honor we give ourselves. You know what I'm saying? And this is why this is so significant. Because when I went to Abaco, when I meet people like Bill Swain, and so many persons, I remember Patrick Bethel. I mean, the community builders, for those of us from 8 Mile Rock, what about Mr. Gibbs, who taught generation? In other words, and these are names that all of us can call about people we know, living in anonymity outside of the immediate communities. But they are so big in terms of what they have done, what they are doing to humanize us, to make us a more perfect people. You know, and this is why, Madam Speaker, the expansion. And I just want to look at the criteria of what it is to be a national hero. Because young people must know that sitting right among us, there are many Lyndon Pinlings, there are many Pompeys, there are many names that we don't even know yet, because some of them will come from the Haitian Bahamian community, and they will rise up, and they will make us greater than we are today. When I look at the criteria that is in Section 9 of the Act, it says, one who has made a seminal contribution to the Bahamas, which has altered the course of history. Now, Madam Speaker, seminal contribution altered the course of history. You mean to tell me from 1498 to now, where's our imagination and our self-knowledge of this society to identify? In fact, when I go to Jamaica, I see there's a Bahamian in Jamaica who is a national hero. Come right out of Grantstown, went to St. Agnes Church, became an Anglican priest, went to the United States, became a doctor, went to Haiti, was involved in a presidential election and had to run for his life and went to Jamaica. And this Bahamian, Madam Speaker, established the first Pan-African newspaper in Jamaica. And that paper exists today, the Jamaican Advocate. But it was in that paper that he got a young Jamaican and trained him. And that young Jamaican who he trained became the largest, most successful civil rights leader in the world. Set up a branch right here in the Bahamas, established the biggest civil rights movement in the United States. When you read the words of Kwame Nkrumah, the president of Ghana, he attributes to Marcus Mosiah Garvey, taught and inspired by a Bahamian right out of Grantstown. Now, if the Jamaicans can define him and teach his name to every generation of Jamaicans in their school, that's why I have to ask, who are we? That he is not even known in the society of his birth. He didn't leave here as a child. He taught just like us with the same Bahamian attitude, but he had a consciousness, and that consciousness shaped Haiti, and it certainly shaped Jamaica, and by extension, it shaped the world. And this is why seminal contribution altered the course of history. And when you look at the first group of activists in this movement towards majority rule, some of them were Garveyites. Some of them were Garveyites, influenced by the ideas of Garvey. If you look at Milo Butler and his consciousness, shaped by Garvey. In other words, that the African people have the capacity to lead themselves and to connect to their homeland. The same way how other people connect to Carolina, England, Scotland. Garvey said, this mighty race in the diaspora. And those ideas have also influenced Bob Marley and the Rastafari movement. So we see then out of Grantstown, a Bahamian, but then it goes on to say, has given service to Bahamas, which has been exemplified by visionary and pioneering leadership, extraordinary achievement of the highest excellence. And that means that each of us today, depending on what we do, we have the capacity to define what our future will be. In other words, by the visionary leadership and work that we do as parliamentarians, but also to recognize that that work is being done by environmentalists, by feminists, by persons in our civil society who are pushing for greater equality, greater opportunity, greater capacity. And I believe, Madam Speaker, that we have that opportunity today. And I know under the leadership of the member of Cat Island, San Salvador, and Ron Key, that there are a number of things that will come forward that will be visionary, that will help to shift the course of history. But that also involves the opposition, because when we say the government, we're talking about the cooperative government. The majority, the opposition, all working together for common destiny. And therefore, Madam Speaker, this provides us a wonderful opportunity to understand that we are the architects of the future we want. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the National Heroes Honors Act 2016. Asmini? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for St. Anne's.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. As I give my contribution this afternoon on the National Honors Amendment Bill 2022, I'd like to start off by recognizing our former Prime Minister, Sir Lyndon Oscar Pinling, and joining in the celebrations with many other Bahamians yesterday. If you didn't remember, you would have seen it likely on social media that this would have been, yesterday would have been his birthday. And we can't ever forget the contributions that he made to this nation, as well as those Bahamians that were serving in the House during that time, no matter what side of the aisle they were on. It was because of their works, as well as the majority of Bahamians that finally had the right to vote, that we've come to this great time in our nation's history, coming up on our 50th anniversary. I know we have a lot to be grateful for, and very much we should all be a proud people and focus on what it is that has brought us here together and kept us united. Madam Speaker, looking at the National Honors Amendment Bill and hearing the order of rank of honors, my ears were perked when I heard the member from Fox Hill refer to one of the awards as the Lignum Vitae Award. I had to scroll through Google and make sure that that word was actually the word that I know it to be, Lignum Vitae. And that then took me further into what that actual award was, because I began to wonder why we don't have awards for our youth in the country. While we recognize those that have become adults and achieved great things, as was described earlier in accordance with the provisions of the National Honors Act, I felt that our youth were not receiving the equal attention and recognition, encouragement especially, because in my view, the greatest way to impact the mind of our younger generation is to show them that the talents from within are being recognized and appreciated. And in addition to the awards that would come under the national awards, that they're being supported and encouraged. I then went further and couldn't find through 2018, 2020, 2017, 2021, any person that had received the Lignum Vitae Award. Now, the Lignum Vitae Award is for persons that meet the criteria as was set out, that are 25 years or younger. There was one person, and if somebody wants to provide in their contribution later a correction, the only person that I've seen as having been recognized with an award in that age bracket of 25 years and younger would have been Shawnee Miller Weibo in 2019. And it's either that we view our youths to be accomplished and worthy of recognition when they've won gold medals or Olympians, or as Bahamians, because this is an application process, a nomination process that we can all participate in. As Bahamians, we're not giving proper consideration to the activities that our younger Bahamians are participating in, and we're not adequately submitting their names and accomplishments to the committee, to the Governor General for consideration. And I think that as we come into this 2022 application year, that it is the responsibility of both sides of this House and every civic organization, every part of our society, to think of a young person that meets the criteria, and that we don't be dissuaded from submitting because we're not sure if every part of that criteria is met. Leave that to the committee that will give consideration to it. But definitely, when the awards are distributed in July of this year, there needs to be persons in that listing that have been awarded the Lignum Vitae Award. We need to do more to recognize people, not just posthumously or not just after they've achieved success upon success, but when they've begun, when they're setting the example, when they're contributing, making an impact to change the history of their own country. Madam Speaker, I do support this amendment bill today. The specific inclusion of persons from civil society is, I think, a great recognition. We need to ensure that we honor the best among us, that we make sure to encourage one another, we pat each other on the back as often as we can, and we lift each other up. I know that I personally think that there needs to be more persons that are receiving these awards, and that we make an effort to acknowledge everybody that is worthy now and not put them on a listing for a future year. We can't award some people today even though they have the deserving criteria, because we already have enough from a particular category. Those individuals may not be around the next year, and we should give them their recognition while they're still alive. Madam Speaker, I think that any talk of doing away with the Queen's honors or the British honors needs to be put into context. The member from Fox Hill rightfully did that. It's within our Constitution. I think that whenever they come out, they're recognized as being the Queen's honors and not the British honors. So we're not a part of Britain, but the Queen is still the figurehead, head of state of our country. And so until we have a constitutional amendment, we don't need to do away with honoring that historic right of recognition that has been a major part of our Bahamian fabric. If an individual is to receive it and they wish not to, they can always turn it down. But like I said earlier, we need to recognize more people. And if we capture an amount under our national honors and an additional amount through the Queen's honors, sometimes they may overlap, then that's fine with me, all the better, because we are focusing on the positives and the great contributors in our society, as opposed to what may seem like so many negatives. Madam Speaker, as a member of the Rotary Club of East Nassau, the largest Rotary Club in District 7020, I know that there's a number of individuals who are worthy of honors within that organization. And I appreciate that there are other organizations like the Lions Club and Kiwanis. I was happy to hear the member for Fort Charlotte recognize the individuals that were on the jet skis, the wave runners. I don't think that I've ever seen the participation like that in any sort of storm. That would have been when I think of Hurricane Dorian was over Great Abaco, and you would have seen the people taking to their wave runners, coming to the aid of stranded neighbors or family members who, in some instances, when they pulled up on the wave runner, it was as if they were pulling up to a dock, a floating dock, but really it was the roof of a neighbor or a family member's home. That just shows the conditions that they put themselves in. And probably with complete disregard for their own safety, because they knew that a job needed to be done, and the bravery was there for everyone to witness and be importantly inspired by. So, Madam Speaker, I'll conclude my contribution to the debate on the National Honors Amendment Bill by again encouraging us to ensure that we recognize as many of us today that are worthy of a recognition and have applications submitted, that each of us make an effort to submit the name of somebody who we think is qualified, especially someone within that 25 and under range. And that as we go forward, we continue to do so, focusing on the best from within us and inspiring each other to make a contribution that'll impact the history of our nation for the good in years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As meeting, Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Long Island.
Madam Speaker, I'm once again grateful to be in this place, to rise on behalf of the hard-working, striving, excellent people of Long Island. Madam Speaker, pleased to rise to lend my support to this bill. I think I was enthralled by the contribution of the member for Charlotte. He took me down history's lane. Just hearing all of the accounts, wonderful heroes who came before us, who paved the way for those of us who have the opportunity to sit in this place today, and for many Bahamians yet unborn. Madam Speaker, I can tell you, as a family island boy, I truly appreciate what it means to have heroes in the community, those people who uplift and build a community, persons who are involved in strawcraft, artisans, because heroes aren't only politicians. Those persons in religion, those persons who are involved in the civil rights and the human rights movement, persons who are activists, fighting for the rights of the downtrodden and those who may not be able to fight for themselves. As it relates to my island, boat builders, an often overlooked grouping, persons who see those regatta boats, someone has to build those boats. That's a part of our culture. They hold our heritage. Farmers, fishermen, persons who contribute daily to our social, what we are socially as Bahamians, as well as economically. I remember growing up, watching, because back in those days, today we have a tea rock, but I remember watching my Grammy and those beating rock, okay, and selling the rock to Mr. Stanley Pinden, those who would pick up truckloads, selling them by the bucket, okay? And that rock no doubt contributed to many of the homes we see and the buildings we see today on these various islands. Efforts like that contribute towards building society. To the people of Long Island, I promised you a hero's wall, and that we will be constructing a hero's wall at the regatta site. I intend to keep that promise. That wall will be constructed from your constituency fund, and it will be situated at the regatta site in Salt Pond. I want to thank the Long Island Association for allowing me to use that site to construct that hero's wall. And Speaker, when you look at a hurricane like Hurricane Joaquin and the damage and devastation inflicted on my people in Long Island, we see civil society, how they came to the rescue, the residents of Long Island. And this, I know the feeling all too well, Fort Charlotte. There are many, hundreds and hundreds of unsung heroes who would have participated, bringing help and hope to the people of Long Island in 2015. And so we must appreciate ourselves, we must appreciate our own. When I went to Jamaica, I note that as I listened to their local radio stations, all I could hear is Jamaican music. It's very true. In the restaurants and the hotels, you see Jamaican food. I remember being in the hotel, and you go down for breakfast, you got your American continental breakfast on one side, and you got your Jamaican breakfast on the other side. Same thing as it relates to dinner. They were proud. They're proud of their culture, yaki and codfish, and all of the other Jamaican food. We must embrace that in the Bahamas. I heard a story in Jamaica, while I was in Jamaica, one of those trips to Jamaica, that they tell the KFCs and those fast food outlets that come to Jamaica that you must use Grace Kennedy ketchup and hot sauce and condiments. You ain't bringing no hunts. So when you get your KFC, get your Grace Kennedy with that too. They mandate that, they tell them that. And I saw that myself, because if you order KFC in Jamaica, your ketchup is going to be made by a local Jamaican company. And so, we too must be proud of our own here in the Bahamas. Adopt that same approach. Okay? We talk about national heroes. We have to embody pride in our own. And I think to connect like that would bode well for the Bahamian people, for our heritage going forward. Madam Speaker, I taught social studies, history when I taught high school. And, when I heard the member for Fort Charlotte, I could only smile because I felt like I was back in class teaching again, teaching civics and social studies. The reality is, we must recognize our heroes. And Fox Hill, I commend you. Those who contributed in their own way to the current political, social, economic, religious standing in this country, the status that we now have, the men who paved the way, struggled for the changes that were needed, who contributed to our very existence today. Yeah, we will know the names of the more prominent persons, but there are many, many others whose names we don't know. I always tell my son, you see that fella there collecting the garbage? We all have a role to play. If he don't collect the garbage, can you imagine the environment we have to live in? Rodents, stench, just complete nasty environment. Indeed, a nation state is shaped by all of these people, not just by us politicians. So I'm happy to see us diversify the awards and the awardees, because for far too long, we've seen only politicians and those who had some prominent role receiving national honors. Madam Speaker, as I stated before, there are many, many unsung heroes, and I believe this creates an opportunity for some of these unsung heroes to finally be recognized. Indeed, we want to see the common, average person on it for service to their communities, particularly in these family island communities, where we see people from within these communities not receiving some of the national honors and local awards for service in various sectors of society. We must honor locals from the islands, people who contributed greatly to our community's development, each settlement. And I think one of the ways to do so is to start looking at naming and renaming side roads after some of these persons, naming and renaming docks after some of these persons, naming and renaming government buildings after some of these persons. Some are alive and some have gone on. Naming and renaming schools. I believe that the schools in Long Island have not yet been officially named. Many of them just carry the community name. Naming and renaming parks after many of these persons who contributed so greatly to our communities. I intend to make submissions to the government after consulting with local government and civil society on Long Island. Persons like Josie Carroll, Henry Milton Taylor, Iris Pinder, former Director of Education, my campaign manager, Bishop Edward Gibson, one of the senior most bishops in the Church of God, Mr. O.A. Pinder, Mr. Lawrence Cartwright, Mr. Lauren Knowles, Ms. Elsie Knowles, the late Elsie Knowles, Reverend Urban Knowles, Lenora Gibson, Mario Sims, Sharon Chili Cartwright. And I grew up with Mario Sims all my life. Sharon Chili Cartwright. You don't have to worry, Fox Hill. I know him very well, all my life. All my life, Fox Hill. All my life. Sharon Chili Cartwright. Rodney Gibson. Mark Knowles, the boat builder. And he does a couple other things as well, very well. I heard the Prime Minister commending him the other day. Harold Watson, Mr. Macon Cartwright, Miss Rosina Pyfrom, and so many others whose names I won't be able to mention today. Indeed, Madam Speaker, these are the persons from my community who I believe should be honored and given awards. And you should do it whilst they're still able to appreciate it. Even though doing it posthumously would also be welcome, we should honor our persons or honor these persons while they can still smell the roses. Madam Speaker, there's a part of the bill that I'm a little curious about. Particularly as it relates to the cancellation or revocation of the award. That's a bit wide, and I imagine that the regulations would specify, set out the areas of cancellation. Because it mentions, a person who's convicted of an offense under the laws of the Bahamas or any other country, what kinds of offenses. And it also speaks to behavior in a manner that is inconsistent with the purpose of the award. Maybe some specificity as to the behavior that you're speaking to. So maybe the regulations or whatever would cover that on Fox Hill. But I think it's a bit wide as is. Madam Speaker, I want to say that I support this bill. I think it's long overdue. And I think it's an opportunity for Bahamians throughout the Commonwealth who've contributed, who've worked hard, who've built community, to be recognized. And that's those Bahamians who might be outside of us, those of us who might serve here in these hallowed halls. I support the bill, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Asmini, the Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for St. Barnabas.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's a privilege to stand here to make a contribution on this bill. And especially because, Madam Speaker, through all of the work that's required for us as parliamentarians, and some would say parliamentarians, politicians, those phrases are interchangeable. For me, this is some of the greatest work that we can partake in, because when all of the jostling is done and the political theater that frankly we all engage in at some point, what remains and what should remain are some of the very substantive things that matters, and I call them legacy things, things that when we're all gone, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years from now, things will be in place. These things will be in place that will still be making a meaningful impact on the fiber of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, I had the opportunity to attend university on a basketball scholarship when I was probably about 30 pounds lighter. South Beach would like that, used to pass balls to each other. But besides the student-athlete experience that I had in university, the relationships with some of the professors that I had, and I spent most of my time in the humanities division. And I had a number of great history professors. And I had a Jewish professor, Professor Burness, who actually just passed some months ago. And he would always remind us that if you want to see what a country values, and he was well traveled, and he would say, if you want to see what a country really values, see what they put in bronze and in stone. Right? And that stuck with me, Madam Speaker, and it came to the fore of my mind today as the member for Fox Hill started this debate. Because this conversation about honoring is something that I feel that we've, generally speaking, done a disservice to, which makes today's debate just crucially important. I believe that not sufficiently have we, or adequately, documented the contributions, the sacrifices of Bahamians throughout the length and breadth of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and quite frankly, many persons who continue to illuminate the corridors of Bahamian history. I believe it's something that we, and hopefully this will be the start, but I believe it's something that we really have to look at and to have not only these honors, which are vitally important, but we need more visual reminders of our history and the contributions of our people. Quite frankly, and I'm not casting any insults on any particular grouping, because I don't know what was the process. I frankly think that the statue of Sir Lyndon is too small, but that's just my view. All right, I'm not knocking any particular person. My view is that we need to be driving around our country. Visitors need to be driving around our country. My heart gets filled when I walk out here, as many of us walk out here some days and we see tourists looking at Sir Milo Butler. Yeah, they stop and look at the Queen down there. But it's just a reminder, because for many persons, even though the song say, visiting the Bahamas once is not enough, for many visitors, when they come here, they will only visit here once. And a sense of who we are will be seen through what they see in our public areas. They're going to leave here, and yes, they can pick up their phones and Google and find out things about the Bahamas, but a real true sense of what the country is about and what we value will be seen, in our public squares, open public spaces. And so I do think that that's something too as well, as we have this discussion about honoring those persons on whose shoulders that we stand, that we really need to think about. I believe that these things are the soul of our nation, as I believe culture is. And too oftentimes, and yes, it's important that we've named buildings, schools, parks, those things are important. But the visual reaction you get when you see a statue, and especially those sculptures or statues that truly embody and capture the sense of that man, that Bahamian man, or that Bahamian woman. And that's why, for example, Madam Speaker, on the St. Barnabas Community Center that we established there on Market Street, the great artist, Alan Pacino Wallace, and his work is all over the country. We put up a mural there And on it, I told him make sure we put Joseph Spence and Amos Ferguson, right? And those persons, they were persons who were from the Grove. But these are Joseph Spence. There are people still to this day around the world who studied Joseph Spence's music. Still do. He was like we say, he was a big man. You know, sir? Yeah. And so we have so many powerful reminders, even walking history books, but powerful reminders of who we are as a people. And I guess that's the core of what I'm getting at here as we debate this, that putting all of the, let's just say, extracurricular things aside, these are the things that are fundamental to who we are as a people. At the end of the day, there will be young girls, right? Young girls who their aspirations will be tied to their question of, well, who were the women speakers in the House of Assembly? And your name will be there, Madam Speaker. Right? And I know you don't take that lightly. I'm just making the point. We may not appreciate it like right now, but 50 years from now, some young girls are going to be having a conversation, and your name and Rome Italia Johnson, right, will be in there. These are powerful reminders. Powerful reminders. This is legacy and what we're all about. And so, as we have this broader discussion about what's happening out there in the public about should we become a republic and different questions, as the member for Fox Hill said, that essentially this is the system we have, and we have it until we change it, and that's a discussion for another day. And actually, when the member for Fox Hill talked about, I guess, this week will be a constitutional reminder of what we have. Now, that doesn't mean that person shouldn't agitate or give views on how it should be amended, but it's just a reminder. I remember in 2018, Madam Speaker, I had the honor to travel with the then Prime Minister, the member for Kalani, to the United Nations. And as members and persons who will visit the United Nations would know, there's a big white leather chair on the side of the podium. Right? And on that particular day, and I haven't honed down on the exact protocol, but this was anecdotally my experience. On that day, our Prime Minister was set to speak. But prior to him speaking, I noticed that world leaders would come and they would sit in the white chair. They would sit in the white chair. Somebody would bring them to the chair, and then they would sit down. And then I noticed when our Prime Minister was brought in, they did not seat him in the white chair. So I was like, hold on, our Prime Minister going to talk. Why doesn't he have the privilege of sitting in this chair? And what I was told by somebody is that the Prime Minister is in the head of state. Right? He isn't the head of state. And the member of Fox Hill is making that point. So he could not sit in that chair. Again, I don't know if that's a hard and fast rule, but this is what was explained to me, that our Prime Minister wasn't going to be allowed to sit down in that white chair because he was not the head of state. So that was a constitutional reminder that day, that day. And so, Madam Speaker, as we look at this bill, the other thing I wish to add is that as we go along and honor the many deserving Bahamians, I think that it's so important, especially in the hyper-political culture that we do have. I believe that it's vitally important that the neutrality of our efforts in how we recognize persons, right? Okay? I always say at the end of the day, sometimes, we look at national honors or we look at honors, and the truth is, people pick through and they tell you, well, I ain't worrying about that one because that one ain't there for them. They say, I ain't worrying about that one. Our one is a PLP. But agreed. And that's my point. At the end of the day, a Bahamian who contributes is a Bahamian who contributes to the development of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, period. And we injure ourselves constantly when we don't put up boundaries in some of the very important conversations we have about national development. You know, it shouldn't matter. You know, it shouldn't matter. I mean, you know, you heard often, you know, in public dialogue, and sometimes it's done in jest. I get it, right? But I always convey to my children that you hear people say, "Well, I'm my prime minister," right? Okay, and sometimes people do it in jest. You know, I'm my prime minister. That's a prime minister of another party. The truth is, the prime minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is the prime minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and we know that. But that's something that I think that we have to constantly litigate with the younger people as they come up through Bahamian culture and get an appreciation for these different ways that we communicate passions and so forth. And so, Madam Speaker, our country, as we know, and as each member has been saying, the great history lesson by the member of Fort Charlotte. And while I did note that, I also noted the quotes by Bob Marley and Buju. And so I realized that the member for Fort Charlotte is more cultured than he gives off, you know? So the rich history of our country. And it's also a reminder, Madam Speaker, you know, we live in a small country, as we know, and we see reminders every day. You know, I always say that, you know, I feel for some of the police officers, you know, because the police officer who might pull you over for running the light is your cousin who you can see at the family get-together on Sunday, right? And while he does have discretion to give you a ticket or not, I mean, we live in a culture where we have these challenges, and not to suggest that your family member should let you get away with breaking the law. The point is that we are a small country, and we have to be very careful again how we adjudicate these issues, because when we feel that we're hurting somebody, we're hurting ourselves, right? If all of us talk long enough, and we have, all of us are connected. All of us are connected. And so, Madam Speaker, these national honors are vitally important to the legacy and the promise of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and the dreams and the aspirations of our people. The dreams and the aspirations of our people, and what it is that they continue to contribute in building this beautiful country that we have. I think that, as I would have mentioned again, the statues and what is put in bronze is something that we really do need to look at. When I was chairman of the Bahamas Public Parks and Beaches Authority, Madam President, one of the things that was very important to me was ensuring that the sculptures done by Stephen Burrows, the late Stephen Burrows, were put up at the roundabouts. And I'm very happy and proud that we were able to do that, to put up these visible signs of Bahamian accomplishment and something that Mr. Burrows would have contributed to the country. And to see that we didn't have to go to China or the United States to have something of that magnitude. And so, again, just in keeping with, in every way we possibly can, to uplift each other in a real way, to uplift each other so that legacies can be preserved. The other day, I was glad to see the former Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Hubert Ingram, has his book now. And I believe that every person, every public figure, every person should try to at least document their life, because it's important. Because these are walking history books that we have. And putting aside the politics, these men and women have contributed to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. There has been contributions in this debate about the fact that we do need to elevate persons who are not politicians, right? Because for some people, only the politician, which we know isn't the case, but for some people, only the politician has contributed to a certain level. And that's not the case. Actually, I would argue that some of the biggest contributors to the development of this great country called the Commonwealth of the Bahamas are not necessarily in that category. Those are the people you don't necessarily see on TV or would have had the great fortune of seeing on a poster, you know, but persons who they've been working in the quarries and teachers. I think about people like Deacon Leviticus Adley, Uncle Lou, who taught me at St. Augustine's. You know, some of the things that I became, even athletically, I had no clue. While I was a basketball player, he called me one day, said, "Come here, son." Said, "You ever throw the javelin before?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "You can throw it today." And I threw javelin nationally. So the point is that there are so many persons that continue to contribute to national development, who don't ask for a camera to be around. You know, they don't ask for anything to be written. They're just there working in the quarries, helping young people, helping this country become what it is today. And so, Madam Speaker, it's a privilege for me to support this bill because at the end of the day, like I said earlier, when it's all said and done, there will be generations of Bahamians who will benefit from this. My great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren will look back, and we would be able to, at least, as we all take our rest, be able to say to ourselves that the magnitude of initiatives, if I could use that word, in this case the bill, initiatives like this, is vitally important to sustaining the level of selfless contributions to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas in all aspects. I mentioned to the member for Garden Hills, who's the Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, for example, and he was my coach one time ago, and there was always a phrase he'd always say, "I like to shoot too much," so, you know, I always think about that. But we were having this conversation, and I believe that we, at this point, we should even have a physical building, an athletic hall of fame. Yeah. A physical building. Yeah. I remember when the Honorable Neville Wisdom was the Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, and he might not have remembered this, but I would have sent to him a proposal in my view of how it could be done. It could be, it's an income generating thing for tourists to see. A physical building now. We don't have to be like the United States where you have, you know, a separate building for each sport. You could have one big, you know, Bahamas Hall of Fame where you can go in and see, you know, the sprints that Shawnee won the 400 meters in. Just imagine, this is what I'm talking about, documenting who we are as a people. Documenting. I told the former member for Fox Hill, in the 80s, right? I was born in 1976, right? Hopefully I don't make nobody feel old in here, right? I was born in 1976, right? But in the 80s, when it came to track and field in the country, right? There were two persons I remember vividly, Chanel Ferguson and Bradley Cooper in the 80s, right? And so I always reminded that besides a parliamentary contribution, that sticks out in my mind in terms of what the former member has contributed. And then right after that, I can remember Frank Rutherford and so forth. My point is that as we're all traversing through our lives in this country, you know, we are simultaneously making contributions in a significant way, and for us to really hold on to our history. Because if we don't have an appreciation for our history, if we don't have a real appreciation, we will lose ourselves. The member for Fox Hill knows that I spend a lot of time in Fox Hill. Well, I used to. That was a stomping ground for me in Fox Hill. But just even being in Fox Hill and hearing the history of the various tribes in Fox Hill, right? To understand what Fox Hill is about, right? These stories are things that really should embolden us as a people and who we are. Even the contributions of Bahamians to the building of South Florida. If you read the history, Bahamians were a big part of that. We all know, the contract and different things. Even in South Carolina, you could find a lot of connection with Bahamians in South Carolina. The point I'm just adding to this, Madam Speaker, is that we are a transcendent country of persons who continue to contribute and help develop other countries, as the honorable member talked about the Bahamian who made that significant contribution in Jamaica, right? Sorry? Yes, Dr. Robert Love. Oftentimes we sell ourselves short. I've often said our country is an incubator of purpose and talent. I don't say the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is the greatest little country on earth. The Commonwealth of the Bahamas is the greatest country on earth because it's simple for me. Name me a country with 400,000 people that has achieved the things that we have. Yes, we have much work to do. No country is perfect, right? I believe in Bahamian exceptionalism. I do. Because I know at the end of the day, when you look at the body of work of Bahamians, wherever they may be, whatever country, whatever continent, Bahamians are making a difference in significant ways, Madam Speaker. And so I will always contend that this is the greatest country in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. There are some countries with millions, hundreds of millions that haven't won one medal. Hundreds of millions. So, based on that, imagine if we were a population of 1 million. Imagine what we would be doing. I mean, if it would seem to reason if our population if we're doing it with 400,000, imagine if we had 400,000 times 3. So, Madam Speaker, I want to thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I spoke very passionately about this because at the end of the day, besides this, there are other things that do matter. But this is very important to the fiber and who we are as a people, that when we wake up every day and after our prayers and thanking God for allowing breath to be put into our body, the next thing I know that I do and many Bahamians do is I thank God that I'm a citizen of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the greatest nation on earth. I support this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member Asmini. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Pinewood.
Madam Speaker, I rise on behalf of the great people of the Pinewood constituency who have sent me to this place to speak on their behalf, whose support I am forever grateful for. Madam Speaker, I try to keep my comments brief. But Madam Speaker, first of all, I'd like to send condolences to the family of the gentleman who was killed in Pinewood, Amapaz, earlier today. May his soul rest in peace. Madam Speaker, what is so contradictory in some of these circumstances as a community, as a country, as I heard of a stabbing taking place at my alma mater, A.F. Adley. And during the lunch break, I heard some comments that was made with regards to what is happening in the public schools. And I use this analogy because to some, that same school would have been a place where myself and the MP from Marco City were graduates. And with the same breath that we criticize for the violence today, we must also appreciate there's another side of the story, that sitting in this chamber is the alternate to this present government. And so we can't be caught in a position where we just lump everything together. Madam Speaker, I agree with the MP for Fox Hill and for Charlotte, who so eloquently laid out in their contributions, and what every member subsequent who got up and speak about our honors. And I personally am proud to be in an era. I've known the MP for Fox Hill a long time, and I know this was one of his passions. I'm a firm believer in changing our institutions for the better. The mark of any country is its institutions, and that includes the individuals. And here we are in 2022, where I, Miles LaRota, the grandson of Miriam Adley, a maid who walked to work with her umbrella every day, Monday to Friday, to see her grandson. Madam Speaker, I'd like to acknowledge our hero, or heroes, Sean If I may, Madam Speaker.
You may be seated.
Madam Speaker, I am, with your permission, I am prepared to yield if you would like our Prime Minister or the Minister of Sports to.
Yes, Honorable Member for Round Key. Honorable Member for Garden Hills. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Garden Hills.
Good evening, colleagues. Once again, Madam Speaker, I'm pleased and honored to present to this Parliament silver medalist Devon Charlton in the 60-meter. Along with our golden medal 400-meter runner, Olympian, champion, world champion, indoor, outdoor, beside the door, on the door, Shawnee Miller-Ubo. Madam Speaker, it's a privilege to have both of them here with us this afternoon. I know we're debating the honors. It's people like these, our raw-born Bahamians, who we think we should honor and be the heroes of our nation. That being said, I will yield to my Prime Minister, or back to, PM.
The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This is a propitious occasion in that we are here debating an amendment to the National Heroes Awards honors, which is a Bahamian honor. And what illustration, what an example that we have in the persons of Shawnee Miller-Ubo and Devon Charlton, who are not just making marks in the Bahamas, but it's a world they're world champions. And it tells us this little rock on which we live, called the Bahamas, that we need to, think about the pride and the inspiration that we as a nation embraced when we saw little Charlton going across those bars in the 60 meters and to come second. I mean, right there saying, come first. but you came second, beating the world. And of course, Shawnee in the 400. That tells us who we are and who we could be. Yes. The member for Fort Charlotte asked, who are we? Yes. Well, that's who we are. Yeah. World champions. And so we ought to be proud of what we are and who we are. Sir Lyndon Pindling, I think, during one of his speeches during independence, at the outset of our independence 50 years ago, or shortly thereafter, and I'm thankful to the member from West End, he shared a part of his speech with me that spoke about the creation of national honors. This was back in 1973. He's talking about having our own national honors to honor our people in our own way and to lift those honors up. Now, worldwide, we should be hearing the most honorable Shawnee Miller receiving the gold medal. Yes, yes. And then what do? We are lifting up our honors. And so we don't have to just continually give what the honors that we would have inherited. Yes, it is past, it's part of our history. It is. But sometimes the historical weight that infects and influences the mind and goes to our ethos may be required to be shed so that we could free that mind to ensure we recognize who we are and we could definitely define and know who we are. We are world class. I want to congratulate the two ladies for keeping us proud. And I have to beat my little chest a bit. Jomo, they're Cat Islands. Cat Island. Oh, Madam Speaker.
Cat Island.
Cat Island. We have some more Cat Islands here, but I will identify them all. But I just want to just thank the minister for taking the time out to let them come to Parliament and the seat of the government and power so that we can express our well wishes to you and to ensure that you continue. Just please continue to make us proud. We are and we'll continue.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member from
Thank you
Marlborough
very
City.
much, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the official opposition, I'd like to join with a fellow Cat Islander in offering our congratulations to both of you for the incredible accomplishments. Most of us were home running on the spot. Some people were running towards the television, cheering for both of you. Obviously, we've watched young Miss Charlton for many years, very much like me, Madam Speaker, very calm, but very calm and measured. Has a poker face that doesn't betray what she's thinking, but goes out and does business on behalf of the country, and we are eternally proud for all that you've accomplished. And I know your mother and father, who are a constant source of strength and inspiration, always there. They're also very proud. And Shawnee, my regret that you're unable to visit me at agriculture after each of your victories. We've changed positions since I saw you last, but we are very proud of you and what you continue to accomplish. And the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and St. Salvador really made the point in the hurdles. Charlton, you demonstrate that what this country really has the capacity to do, and that is no matter how difficult things are, what obstacles, in this case, the hurdles that you encounter, we have the capacity as a country to overcome them. And so metaphorically, you did for us in running that race what we are seeking to do in this place to address the various concerns and challenges that we have as a country and overcome them collectively. And Shawnee, you demonstrate the consistency that we need nationally in order to represent our people in a way that we could help them overcome the challenges that they have. And so the opposition joins with the government in celebrating you and thanking you for inspiring the rest of us. God bless you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for final.
Madam Speaker, I too would like to join in the chorus of congratulating our two heroine athletes. I think it's apt, Madam Speaker, that we are debating the National Honors Amendment when we have two most deserving individuals right now. I'm sorry, so that just, Meta has one, my bad. That means we have one individual who have not received hers yet. But Madam Speaker, sports is the one uniter of things. Here we have both sides. And Shawnee, when you win your fourth, the member will be in the same side of the house, so you could know where to find him. My good classmate, my good brother. I had to do that one. Yes, Madam Speaker. But as we are talking about, as I was mentioning early on, we talk about our institutions. We talk about where we are as a country, that, you know, the grandson of a maid and the great-grandson of Zerlina Harriet Coakley, who was born in 1884, who I would hear these stories of what her grandparents went through. And to see that today they could have their offsprings in positions that could change the lives of future generations. Future generations in that both my great-grandmother left school at 12, my grandmother at 13, because as mentioned early on by Fort Charlotte, there was a period when there was, one government school. But imagine, high school, correct. My great-grandmother lived to, I think she was like 87 years old, and never came to Nassau, the seat of power. The world was not that big where she could travel, even though she had 3 brothers that lived in the States. She never had a passport. And here her great-grandson is, and I use quote unquote, a decision maker. And so we who are here, we have an obligation and a duty to put our country on the right track where we can, just as we are in sports, just as we are as academics. And I would delve briefly into the Republic versus the status quo. The Constitution is what it is until we change that. But I too have this firm belief that we are at a time in our history point where I don't know of any Bahamian that goes to Miami for heart surgery anymore. We have Dr. Dwayne Sands and others where we could perform those surgeries here. Very seldom we hear of our Bahamian patients being transported to the States for trauma injuries. We service them here. And so we are a country that is special. We may not have the numbers as alluded to by St. Barnabas, but we have quality. You know, we are a country where the Bahamas is the only country outside of the United States that has had 2 first-round picks in the NBA. The only one. China with 1.6 billion only had 1. And that tells you what we raise here. And, you know, long before St. Barnabas's career, I was part of an organization called Hoyts, helping our youth through education and sports, founded by Gladstone Moon McPhee. Doug Collins, the late Chuck Mackey, Tony Crean out of Eleuthera, and others. And we had what we call the West Coast Tour. 2 weeks in July, we took our kids to either Arizona or California and then Vegas, where they played against some of the top talents in the country. I saw NBA players like Jason Kidd play in grade 11. And I saw our kids who we put together on 2 weeks practice and see what they could do against much cohesive units. And some of those individuals have come back and become coaches of their own. And so this is the story of the country that we have. There's one particular situation that I will never forget. There was a young man, when we got into Vegas, before he called his parents, he called his basketball coach. Bill Morgan was at C.I. Gibson. And that will tell you subliminally, if you're going to call your coach before you call your parent, it tells you the role of these coaches in the lives of these young men. Nobody will probably give Bill Morgan an award. And there are lots of Bill Morgans out there throughout the length and breadth of the Bahamas. And so I joined the chorus. Let us widen our heroes list, our honorees, because a lot of this decisions is made by people like us or people who have a voice. Does anybody consider the voices of the most vulnerable? That worker from social services who deal with people every day, that teacher who put their hands into their pocket to buy school supplies. Simple as people who in communities who share the little that they have with their neighbors, because in their mind they're not doing anything special, but it's the right thing to do. And so, Madam Speaker, when we look at what road we are going to go in terms of our honors list, whether it be Bahamians, because I understand that point, and I understand it very well. Until we change it, it is what we have, so I won't criticize those who look the other way, because I understand that thinking too. I've spoken to enough of our precious pearls, as the former minister Algernon Allen would refer them to, who have their way of thinking also. You know, that must be respected. But as we move forward, our final court of appeal, in my view, should rest in the Bahamas. I think that we have enough talent here for that to be done. And I think that the argument that was always put forward that at some point, we have to be responsible for our own country, because we have a duty when we leave, just as our parents, for our kids to have a better life than us. We have this obligation to hand off this country to the next generation much better than when we took it over. And sometimes we make decisions that not everybody may agree with, but people could understand when it's made in good faith. And so, Madam Speaker, I close by saying that we are a great people. Notwithstanding all of our faults, I echo St. Barnabas, we are a great country. And we have to start thinking that we are a great country. And we cannot let our little bumps in the roads deter that thought. We must get to a point where we see Bahamians, because we cherry pick what we want to be Bahamians on, you know. We look at the UB situation, and I would love to see another president of the University of the Bahamas, but we must be consistent also. If we are going to say that we want everything Bahamian must be everything Bahamian. And so I challenge us as leaders in here, because that is exactly what we are as we move forward in dealing with our national honors, where we're going to have to decide at some point whether they're going to be true national honors or is there going to be a hybrid. But someday we're going to have to come to that decision. I hope it's sooner rather than later. Madam Speaker, I support this amendment.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Asmini. The chair recognizes the Honourable Member
It's okay.
for Vice Grand Bahama and Bimini.
Madam Speaker, I just want to lend a few words to this inspirational debate. So inspiring, particularly listening to my colleagues who led and seconded the debate. What an incredible job that they did. And to have the brilliance of our athletes arrive on this day. And I looked at Siobhan Shelton, and I remember the very first Bahamas games. I had the privilege as a reporter to interview her father, David Shelton, who was a 400-meter runner. And so to see them here, I am overjoyed the fact that we can celebrate. And when the minister responsible for sport was speaking this morning, he said, #1 in the world. When the Prime Minister spoke this afternoon, he said, in the world. Do we recognize that? The world, the billions of people in the world, and we are #1. I don't speak, it's inspiring. I'm also thoughtful of that moment in history that we will never forget. Soon after the Royal Bahamas Defense Force was founded and operational in 1980, we lost 4 of our seamen. Those are heroes. Those are heroes, Madam Speaker. And I'm celebrating this legislation because the legislation allows us to honor the 4 the way they should be honored. We have an opportunity to bestow upon them the highest honor which they've earned, Madam Speaker. They can receive, as the member for Fort Charlotte pointed out, posthumously. So now they are able to get the honor and the forever recognition of their heroic act in the interest of our country. That I will never forget. Madam Speaker, the greatness of our nation is seen by the impact we make. The world, changing the world, just as Sir Sidney Poitier did, changed the world. He changed the world for the African American. He changed the world for Black all over the world and caused many to believe that they too one day could perform at the highest level. Sir Sidney Poitier told us of his story, told us of the fact that he could not even read and how a young man came and helped him. And then he went on to become the great actor that he was. But many forget, Madam Speaker, that he won the first Oscar. But many don't remember that we also won the first, not Sir Sidney, a Bahamian also won the first award of an African American on Broadway. His name was Burt Williams. Burt Williams. That is correct. Prime Minister remember as well. Burt Williams. No, could you? The point, Madam Speaker, is that's the Bahamas. When we want to be, we can be, and when we work together, And that is why when I listen to my colleagues on the side opposite speak today, I feel like we're finally running a relay in here. We're passing the baton on, and we're speaking progressive. We're talking about where this country can be if we work together. And it can't just be on such debates. It must be on all debates. We can agree to disagree, Madam Speaker, but we must remember there is that middle road that we can find as progressives, as individuals thinking about a greater country. Madam Speaker, I'm from Grand Bahama, and I always criticized the wars because I always thought that the wars were always focused on New Providence, as if only people of New Providence were the builders of this great country. And we forgot some of the greatness in Grand Bahama. We forgot the behavior of the Grand Bahamian after the 1955 Hawkesbury Creek Agreement, when thousands of acres of land were sold for $2.80 an acre. And then we were in the East and in the West, and they had to build country from the East and the West and had to be participants for the democracy of our country. Because at that point, we were not equal. At that point, you had to see the men of East and West join their forces together to challenge the authority, to become leaders and to lead and to assist the Progressive Liberal Party in becoming the government in 1967. Madam Speaker, this means so much to people like me because I've always wondered what would have happened had they fallen. What would have happened if they didn't take West End, which was the capital, is the capital, will ever be the capital, and you didn't have great men in West End? What happened if those men didn't stand up, like the Fred McKenzies? What happened if they didn't stand up? The Artis Neelys, the Hilton Bowlegs. What happens if they decided that they weren't going to fight? Granville Garvey, Simeon Brown Sr., and the women, their wives at their side, fighting and raising money in Grand Bahama to send to New Providence for the newspaper of the party to continue. That's what they had to do. And then you had preachers there, and we talked about the preachers who were fighting for the cause, people like John N.T. Roll, who came from Andros and set up in Grand Bahama and was able to be a leader to the point where he would join and become a leader also in the United States of America for the Baptist Institute. Madam Speaker, we have great people, but we don't stop long enough to celebrate our people because oftentimes we get petty politics get in the way. No one could ever deny the greatness of some of our people who served on the opposite side. No one can deny what they've done, but yet we try to do it. And we think it's right, but what we do is we tear down the country when we can't lift up our people. I was having a conversation just last weekend, and I was talking with some people in Grand Bahama. And I said, who's the greatest athlete to come from Louis Yard Hunters in Mactown? Everyone paused because they couldn't remember that athlete is a man named Fletcher Lewis. Fletcher Lewis became the first Grand Bahamian to represent this country at the Olympics in long jump. Madam Speaker, greatness. But people don't remember because we don't celebrate him. We don't celebrate his work and what he did. He's still around, he's still alive, but very few know who he is. In 8 Mile Rock, West Grand Bahama, well, I'm fortunate because, believe it or not, Donald Thomas is from 8 Mile Rock, John Quill Jones is from 8 Mile Rock, Buddy Hield is from 8 Mile Rock, all in West Grand Bahama. We're thinking of ways now to celebrate this and to cause for things to be written and for it to become a great attraction for foreigners coming to our land. Madam Speaker, I'm one of the Bahamians who believe in celebrating our own. I don't care where he is, I don't care what color he wears, I don't care what he stands for. When our Bahamians do well, I'm exceedingly proud. I'm very disappointed, however, when we don't understand the importance of that, when we're celebrating everybody else and not celebrating ourselves. Madam Speaker, I want to see, and I agree with the member for St. Barnabas, I want to see some of our roundabouts now with some statues of some of the greatness. Yes, I like the fact that we remember our culture. I like the fact that we have the roosters and the crawfish, lobster, and the conch. I'm just very good. But I really would love to see some faces, particularly on Independence Drive. I really believe, Independence Highway, I really believe that it's time now to put some statues of some of our great people. I really believe it's a part of the teaching process. If we want our people to begin feeling good about each other, if we want to teach youngsters and show them ways in which and who they ought to be looking up to for the building of our country, I think it's imperative that they are seen on a regular basis. I want to see in education. I heard the Minister of Education talk about teaching in the new books and the need to have the curriculum change, particularly civics. That's important, Madam Speaker. That's important the same way it's important for the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas. We need more television shows created, more documentaries done. We need more to be said, more to be done, more to understand, because it's a teaching process. Because, as I said before, you have the infusion of the foreign media. So the stars of America become the stars of the Bahamas. What about the stars of the Bahamas being the stars of the Bahamas and the world? They will celebrate Americans, and I'm with them if they want to. The British will celebrate the British, the Canadians. Those are networks we get in. And then, of course, if you watch ESPN, it's the Americans. Well, Madam Speaker, I really believe that our local television stations have to counter, and we have to utilize them effectively to get messages across to the people so that people would understand and appreciate the distance we've traveled, where we are, and where we're going. Madam Speaker, next year is the 50th anniversary of our country. Well, I'm hoping that it's all about us next year. I'm hoping, as I heard a member say earlier, the member for Long Island, I'm hoping to hear more radio stations with Bahamian music, more. I love Charles Carter's radio station. I'm hearing Bahamian music any time of the day. I love when I'm at the airport, it's all Bahamian music. Love it, Madam Speaker. But why can't we have more? Why can't we change the ratio? Why can't we ensure that we're celebrating? And why aren't we looking at the 50 top Bahamian artists, or all the artists over the last year? Who are they? Ronnie Butler, who else? Who are the good ones? The T-Connection. What about them? I'll call in the VIPs. What about all these people? What about Exuma the Obeah, the beginning of the end? What about these people, Madam Speaker? But they should be featured now. Yes. That's what we should be talking about now. Madam Speaker, I'm hoping that the government would agree, and I spoke with the member for Fort Charlotte. I'm hoping that we can get to the point where we will provide an opportunity for playwrights to get the Dundas up and going again, to get seasons going again. So why can't we provide the seed capital? And why can't we set an agenda for next year that we have a season that begins in spring as a part of the 50th? And why can't each of these groups or some selected ones get $100,000 to get it all going? Why can't they? And why shouldn't they? We should be in theater next year, Madam Speaker. We have to get it going. We have to tell the story, and we have to appreciate. Some will get the story from in a way, in different ways, and some would want to go and listen. Some would want to hear the music, the stories on the radio. Some would want to go to theater. Some will go to the movies. Some will watch television. What we must do is we must ensure that we're providing for the Bahamian people. Madam Speaker, I believe that we have a great opportunity. I believe that this is going to be fantastic for our country. I'm very encouraged by the fact that we could honor people that otherwise would never be heard. Otherwise, nobody would know what they did and the effort they made to cause us to be the country that we are. Those women and men who gave so much to make such a difference in our nation. And all of us today, on both sides of the political divide, are benefiting as a result. So, Madam Speaker, West End supports this bill. West End supports these amendments. And West End proposes that we build a country that's envious to all and great to every Bahamian. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Marco City supports the amendment of the National Honors Act 2016. It was outlined carefully the contribution made by the Christie administration with respect to this bill. I would like to go back a little further. As you would have heard, Madam Speaker, from the time of the Pinling administration, the country had a consciousness that we needed to celebrate the contributions of Bahamians from all stratas of society and in all arenas. Members, particularly the veteran members of this chamber, would also be aware that in 2001, former Prime Minister Hubert Alexander Ingram, in fact, had drafted very comprehensive bill that no doubt benefited from the work done previously, and in particular, the activists who shared their views in terms of what the new Bahamas ought to look like. And of course, in 2017, it was a priority of the F&M administration, and we brought into force the actual act and left in place prior to the change of government the regulations, which it is my hope that the member for Fox Hill would ensure that the regulations come to the House. It would give us another opportunity to, I brought a copy, would give us another opportunity to have a discussion, because the regulations provide some details that I think would be very beneficial to the country. And so back to the point made in a series of contributions in the House, government is continuous. But what is important is that no matter where you slice in our history as a country, each administration recognized the importance of us celebrating our people. The unfortunate thing is, since policymakers are responsible for establishing these advisory committees and tend to pick persons with whom they are quite comfortable, and in some cases who are simply flat out competent, notwithstanding what their politics may be, the lists tend to be populated by policymakers, magistrates, or persons from the judiciary, business persons, etc. But we are beginning to see the widening, and the way in which this particular this amendment has been drafted, it intentionally opens other categories that will allow us to celebrate a number of other Bahamians. And so it is wonderful that we have spelled out civil society, and in particular, offering the definition, non-governmental organizations, even international groups that contribute to the charitable efforts in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. It is true that government cannot, not just in this jurisdiction, but in almost no jurisdiction, government is serving all of the needs of its people. And that is precisely why the United Nations shifted its focus to starting to hold a series of conferences that focused on the role that NGOs played in different countries around the world, because the UN came to the conclusion that government is not the only actor that is acting in the interests of its population. Some governments are not committed to it, other governments don't have the capacity. And therefore, celebrating non-governmental organizations is an important step that we need to take as a country. And so that is important, and it would in fact behoove all of us to appreciate the role that non-governmental agencies play in our development, and to be careful and not to alienate them. Secondly, the amendment also outlines an important attribute, and that is bravery. I'm certain that those that crafted that was not picking that because they know that would bring in an entirely new category of persons. I'm quite sure that policymakers still have a measure of that. But let me say that during Dorian, we saw the heroic efforts of many of the jet ski operators, and in fact, they have been honored in multiple ceremonies over time. In fact, in Grand Bahama, the Governor General himself came over and presented to those heroines and heroes who assisted on multiple levels during the hurricane, some members from Rotary, but certainly a number of the persons who played a pivotal role in the rescue efforts, and especially those persons on the jet ski. The hurricane had passed, but we were at the stage where the water had begun to recede, and my family, we rode out the storm in our home, which was destroyed at that time, and certainly 3 young men who I knew. It was really a powerful experience seeing them come, and they took care of my family and ensured that we were transferred to safety. And again, we worked together in going back and finding those families that we were still there. I mean, more than 200 persons they were responsible for bringing to safety, some before the storm, some in the midst of the hurricane, and some like my family at the end of the hurricane. And so we're eternally grateful to them and their sacrifice. So the bill talks about, the amendment speaks to bravery as one of those qualities. And then public servants. Public servants sometimes get a bad rap, that persons often look at the challenges that exist within the culture of the public service, which has to be improved. That is it is an irrefutable fact. But what is also true is that there are many public servants who wake up, pray up, show up early, stay late if necessary, even working in less than ideal conditions, and they continue to contribute. And there has to be a pathway where they are celebrated. Just as an aside, Madam Speaker, almost every week I'm attending multiple funerals, unfortunately. We have lost so many people, particularly over the course of the pandemic. And one of the things that happened in here today with this amendment, there is a kind of a sweet spirit seeps in, right? And so we start singing, some would say, Kumbaya. We start pulling together because we know that celebrating Bahamian exceptionalism is in our collective interest, and that no party, notwithstanding even the name of blueprint, no party has the blueprint for the transformation of the Bahamas. It is really a collective effort that is required. And in a similar way, when I go to funerals, it's that same kind of spirit, meaning in this discussion, it's clear. I mean, this is about celebrating, as Father Willie used to say, William Thompson, when he introduced somebody, he loved to say, I'm introducing to you really the best of what this nation has produced. And so even if somebody knew that in that moment they weren't clicking on all cylinders as a human being, what he said was aspirational for them. In other words, sometimes people talk about you in a way that you begin to aspire to be better than what you are at the moment. And he did that when he introduced us. But at funerals, things become crystal clear. You know what is important. The beef you had with a family member who was there at the funeral in the congregation, or the person who died, those missed opportunities to say, I love you and I care about you, all now lost. So what is crystal clear is this is a permanent experience for this person, at least on this side of glory. And it makes you think about your own mortality and how you might relate better with those persons who are left with you in the family, in your other spheres of influence. And you start to recalibrate. Now, unfortunately, as Bahamians, we're given to backsliding. So we leave the service and we go back to the same old tribalistic behavior. It is my hope that we as a country are constantly reminded of the importance of us celebrating each other beyond those artificial lines that separate us, whether it's in politics, whether it's in which group you support at Junction or which denomination you attend. And so, Madam Speaker, these amendments are very important. And again, I gather from the reaction of the member for Fox Hill that we'd have an opportunity to discuss the regulations relative to this particular amendment. It is ironic that we are having this discussion against in a sense, against the backdrop or at a time when the royals are visiting the Bahamas, and the opposition is absolutely clear that this is a national event, and we certainly intend in various ways to participate. But it's not lost on us. It's not lost on us that the monarchy, in this case, that's visiting the Bahamas, and other monarchies continue to make the case for the perpetuation of their particular family and what their family represents. And the Bahamas, as a country, has to act in its own interests as well. And which is why it is important that we have a discussion about where we are headed as a country. We are a mature people, and certainly it is possible to remain a functioning member of the Commonwealth while at the same time creating a structure of government where the head of state is in fact a Bahamian. That is essentially where we.
I'm moving act right now. If you all vote for it.
You said again. This is the direction that we ought to move as a mature country. And recently, you would have heard the allusion, the reference to even having the final court of appeal being, rather than the Privy Council, on both the criminal and civil side here in this, at a minimum, in this jurisdiction, if not in this particular country. And so that is a discussion we'd be prepared to engage in. I mean, it's a new dispensation. And so we ought to, as a mature people, to be looking at how we are able to shift this conversation. Oftentimes when I hear people talk about classics and royals, it is important to ask. When somebody say, "Do you listen to the classics?" I said, "Yeah, I do. I absolutely love John Coltrane, and Miles Davis, and no. I mean, Bach, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky. Oh, okay. Oh, you mean the European classics? And even there, we know that not all of those names identify were of European descent. In fact, some were African, and so." It was encouraging today to hear some of our colleagues, the member for Fort Charlotte, talk about the historical contributions that persons of African descent have made to the transformation of the global conversation on where we ought to go. And that some of those persons are, in fact, descended from the Bahamas. This exercise we are engaging in, Madam Speaker, is not a new exercise in the region. Jamaica, very shortly after its independence, had already begun engaging in the process of honoring their people with indigenous honors. And so this shouldn't be a controversial issue. The supreme honors in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas ought to be indigenous honors. And the psychological transformation of our people to embrace it, and when it's conferred on them, to feel that sense of pride, that is going to come. There will be some who, by virtue of the circles they move in the international sphere, want some honors that is easily recognized by their peers in the other 50 plus Commonwealth countries. So I understand that, I get that. But certainly the primary awards in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, awards, rewards, medals, ought to be indigenous awards. And my children and your children will grow to fully appreciate it. Right now, again, people are still enamored with, in fact, it's so ironic. There have been some who have been adamant that they are against the awards that have been conferred from Great Britain. But years later, they wear them with such tremendous pride, and no doubt grace. And so we understand that tension that tugs on persons to be celebrated by having awards that originate elsewhere conferred on them. Well, you know, we are grown up now. 50 years later, you're now on the old side. In fact, 50 years later, you have more years behind you than you will have in front of you in terms of living. And so it is important for us to begin to shift in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. One of the issues I know that the committee that addressed these honors have been looking at is the issue of parity. And so, yes, the family islands have to be factored in a more significant way, because almost invariably, when you look at the persons who are awarded from the family islands, they tend to be heavily politically laced, meaning, you know, politicians think about those persons who are pretty much loyal to them. And yes, some will be pastors, some will be from some other vocations. But in terms of those seminal kinds of contributions to the development of the family islands, and by extension, the country, a number of notable Bahamians are overlooked. And so I'm happy that the committee it will be looking at how do you bring parity. It is true that we also have to be more specific in terms of eliminating any ambiguity in the amendments. And so the point in terms of saying, of discussing whether somebody's behavior, that is, when somebody receives the award, their behavior has to be consistent with the aim and objective or the purpose of the award. That has to be defined a little bit more. There is a degree of ambiguity. It would be useful as well in a subsequent amendment for your consideration that we spell out that the regulations ought to be brought to Parliament. I know it's silent, the original bill is silent on that subject, but it would be wonderful if we could specify that. I think all of us would agree that this discussion has been healthy for us in here and for those Bahamians out there. And so to further delve into those regulations, I think would be an important next step. And it is my hope that will be a part of your consideration in terms of amendments. We have an...
I shouldn't even tell you this. In the Interpretation of General Clauses Act, if you disagree with a regulation, you know that you can bring a resolution to have a negative vote, if you wish.
To have a...
If you want, for example, the regulations don't have to be brought to the House, but once you gazette a regulation, you have 6 weeks. As a member of Parliament, you can bring a resolution to the Parliament to annul the regulation. So if you wanted to have a public discussion on them, it's possible at any point in time, within 6 weeks of its gazetting. I shouldn't tell you that, but
Look at God. This is the beauty of this discussion. It actually takes a serial voice note deliverer and just touches and warms his heart to come and to come and share valuable information, and that's very helpful. So thank you, member for Fox Hill. Madam Speaker, the Bahamas have so many extremely talented persons, and so the next few comments I wish to make, I'd like to borrow from Lerone Bennett. Lerone Bennett, an African-American business person and philanthropist, entrepreneur, made the point that it's important for us to correct historical biases without introducing new biases. And so I believe that we have an opportunity against the backdrop of this discussion for us to engage in a meaningful way in terms of celebrating a number of Bahamians who have been overlooked over time. I have an extensive list of names for consideration. These are names that under both administrations have been considered for the next round of awards. Some of these persons have been honored previously. It is important, Madam Speaker, for us to widen our search. And so we're hoping that the government will create a campaign around getting Bahamians involved in submitting names. I believe that we are late at the moment in terms of getting this process completed. So I would rather not belabor the point that we're late in getting this out, but by asking that we make this a significant undertaking in our community. I believe it will resonate with Bahamians, because one of the surest ways to say thanks to people is really to recognize the contributions that they have made. And it is something that will inspire their children and their children's children. And so the list, Madam Speaker, like I said, is extensive. And while, yes, there are some creatives on this list, some playwrights, journalists, overwhelmingly, it's a list that has persons from the usual categories. And so I'm encouraging us to go in a different direction as it relates to the Bahamians who we hold up as role models that our young people ought to aspire to be like as well. We talked about the impact of Bahamians on the international scene. In diplomacy, my uncle happens to be on the Cat Island side, Ragged Island and Cat Island, Dr. Davidson Hepburn. And Madam Speaker, I fell in love with international diplomacy because he was at the UN. I had the good fortune years later of testifying at the UN as a part of a student caucus calling for the end of apartheid. So we went to the UN, was invited to make presentations to members on why we believe as young students that we should end the apartheid regime. The Bahamas was prominent in that fight. And as a student in the United States at Tuskegee University, I had an opportunity to go there. And listening to persons talk about Davidson Hepburn, it was just a source of pride that here's a Bahamian at the UN, and he was celebrated by his colleagues internationally. All of us in here can think of another Bahamian in a different arena that has had the same kind of impact. I can think of young Mr. Bascom, who sits on the board of the National Art Gallery, whose the percentage that he passed his exams in was recognized internationally because he did exceptionally well when he sat his exams in university. I can think of the Bahamian poet, young Mr. Kristen Campbell, who resonates in terms of the work that he does globally in literature. Patricia Glinton Mikolas, who's the author of the book that was laid on the table today, one of the most prolific Bahamian writers that studied internationally, right alongside Marion Bethel, the better half of the member for Fort Charlotte, an absolute gifted writer, a gifted writer who is celebrated internationally, has won international awards, who has influenced the member for Fort Charlotte. So when you hear him ask the question, who are we? It is the influence who says, this we now. And he went on to define, he went on to answer the question. Marion Bethel, who has influenced those of us who write. We have been influenced by Patricia Glinton Mikolas, Marion Bethel, Patrick Ramming, etc. And so we are influencing young men and women, students globally, through books that we have or pieces of literature, whether it's an article or poem, poetry set to music that's being used internationally. And so I always find it cute when I'm in here and the one thing that members in their private workshops, when they are critiquing the opposition, the one thing they keep going back to is this script that says, yes, we know when he speaks, he's speaking as a poet. No, celebrate the poets in the country, a member for Freetown. Celebrate the poets in the country, member for West End and Bimini. Don't use it as a pejorative. Embrace it, because we are moving. If with the crows you would not fly. That's a quote that Joel used. I'm just kidding. So. I never asked for free so it is important. It is important for us to reflect the diverse talent in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. We had the good fortune just now of celebrating Shawnee Miller-Weibo and Devon Charlton. Stephen Gardner, again, is yet another world champion who hails from the Bahamas. Adrian White happens to represent a constituency that produced some other folks that won gold medals in sailing. I'm advised that that the Bahamas Olympic Association has an interest in using as a motif, for example, a vessel in the front of the new building that they hope to construct in partnership with the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Culture. So it would be wonderful, again, to celebrate Bahamian sailors in a very tangible way. As you know, just before you all bring another document to Parliament, and not get to mention it, I know it would be your intention to do so, we have approved, and there should be a cabinet conclusion showing that we've designated sailing as the national sport of the Bahamas. And we want to thank the member for Cat Island, Rumkey. It has been done already. And we want to thank the member for Cat Island, Rumkey in San Salvador, and the member for Exuma and Ragged Island for having endorsed that move. And I think it opens an opportunity for, in these award ceremony, now to celebrate a whole nother category of Bahamians. We just opened a bridge. The Minister of Works led that charge in Abaco. The young man who built the bridge is the youngest, most celebrated sailor today in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Where you from?
He's from Long Island.
That's right.
Right. And so again, this is someone who is an excellent engineer, but an incredible sailor who has in many ways exemplified Bahamian exceptionalism on multiple levels. And he's following in the footsteps of Sir Dervid and all of those other sailors who have traveled globally, putting the Bahamas on the map in the very early days. And so I wish to commend all administrations, from Sir Lyndon's tenure in office, Hubert Alexander Ingram, Perry Christie, Hubert Minnis. These amendments are to a bill that 4 prime ministers had the presence of mind and the sense of nationalism and patriotism to initiate a discussion and continue to build on the discussion that we need to celebrate the best of Bahamians. And so I pray that we would use this as an example, that we ought to move in unison on things that are in our collective best interest. But we ought to move with a sense of urgency, because there is no reason it should have taken us nearly 50 years to get to this point. With that, Marco City supports the amendments.
Thank you, Honorable Member Asmini. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Fox Hill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, honorable members who made contributions to this bill. And as I said, the debate proved that we are engaged and understand that we are engaged in the business of statecraft. If I might just digress to extend to the government and people of the United States of America are the condolences of the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and its government on the passing of Madeleine Albright, former Secretary of State of the United States, who I had the opportunity to work with in my various incarnations in this job I now have. And she was the first female Secretary of State for the United States, and so was a seminal symbol for women in that country and around the world. So may she rest in peace. There's lots of interesting threads to pick up in this debate. I wanted to say that one of the issues raised by the leader of the opposition about the numbers of these awards actually had to do with some physical limitations, because the British awards are allocated on a pro rata basis around the world amongst all the countries. So it works something like this. Like there's a total class of, let's say, 100 knighthoods available around the world. And the class of knighthoods never gets larger than 100. It's only 100. So the only way you can get an award, and I'm not using that number because I don't know what the exact number is, the only way you can get an award is if somebody dies, because they don't give awards posthumously. So if 10 or 20 people die this year, that means 20 knighthoods become available in the class. And then they divide that amongst the Commonwealth countries that accept the awards. That's not, so I think we got, the last set we got was maybe, there were no knighthoods available, right, for example. That category was exhausted. So the top category was the CBE CMG category. And then it goes then down from there. Our limitations were not based on that, but instead only a limited number of medals were ordered. So, for example, Order of the Bahamas, we were informed by the Chancellor's office that there were only, let's say, 30 of those medals. So the question is, how many do you give out in a given year? And they were actually limited by the number of the physical medals we had. So that was one of the, if you want to call it a disability. The other thing that was operating on the collective minds of the advisory committee, and remember, ultimately these are conferred by the cabinet, not by the advisory committee, because the advisory committee gives advice to the prime minister, and then the decision is made by the cabinet. So the other thing that was operating on our minds, apart from the physical limitations of the number of medals, was do you give out 10,000 of these? Right, because if you give out 10,000, then what does it do to the value of the medal? So it's got to be a limited category, so it is known as something that you aspire to. So that was the other limitation that we were operating under when giving advice. So I thought that Mark Humes did an able job and negotiating his way through this. I thought that myself that the National Heroes category, at least in the first year, I thought myself should have been limited to Lyndon Pindling alone because of the unique circumstances of who he was. You could add categories later, but ultimately the cabinet decided otherwise. Now, I mentioned that because some colleagues had an issue with who was named, which you can have an issue with, and I had individuals. But I said to myself, the same argument I'm making with this constitutional position today. I can't argue with a bill that I actually passed or helped to pass and gave the authority to the person who has the authority. The person has the authority. It was a bill which I helped to pass, so they have as they say, the rabbit has the gun, right? So the person who has the authority in law makes the decision, and it's their discretion. When we get in the chair, then we have a discretion to do otherwise. And I would hope that those on the other side would respect that discretion as well when it's exercised. That's the view I took of these honors. And I took that view because the authenticity of this and its legitimacy has to be respected across the board. Otherwise, it makes no sense to the country. So each side has to accept the legitimacy of the awards. And so whoever is in the seat of authority has the right to confer the awards. And you may disagree with their choice, but my argument was that you accept that the decision maker has the right and exercises that discretion, and so that's that. And we are where we are with regard to it. I had in fact forgotten that this was actually brought into effect by your administration, because we had left it not brought into force. So kudos for that. So I just wanted to address that point on the limitations. I do think, left to me, because I think sometimes you have to force these issues, because you can argue back and forth, should we have parallel honors, should we not? I think we ought to ban them, abolish them, the British honors, completely, and it's just the Bahamian honors. Because as long as there's a parallel system, there's going to be this difficulty. But as I say, we don't have a consensus on that matter. I'm sorry? I'm not sure I'm permitted to say. I just can say that there's no consensus to go that direction. But I think that clearly, as I say in other spheres, it's an evolving matter. And in a democratic society, I think that activists have the right to pursue where they think this ought to go. Because remember, we had to build a lot this was not easy to do. Even within the Progressive Liberal Party, this was not easy to do, because the cachet of the British awards still has a lot of resonance with many people. And even though we are the progenitors of the independence movement, remember now that Sir Lyndon and his colleagues couldn't take us straight to a republic, which is what we should have done right at the start, like Dominica did. Immediately go to republic status. But there's a very strong conservative element in our country, even amongst the African population, that said, that's right, on both sides. And so independence was sold in our country on the basis of, don't worry, even though we're independent, the Queen is still going to be there and everything is going to be safe and fine. That's how it was sold. And we were able to convince people to go along with the project, because largely nothing changed. That's the way it looked on the outside. Although from a juridical and legal basis, we have the absolute authority to do what we wish, because the Queen is ceremonial in that sense. But that was the way independence had to be sold, because it was it was not an easy proposition to sell. And you know that there was a significant movement in Abaco of people who said, look, we don't want any part of this. So that's why going to republic status is still an issue in the country today. And even though the younger people now, with this visit of the couple coming in a couple of days, don't see the sense of it, or at least some people don't see the sense of it, but we can't, so far, I've asked people like the member for Centerville and, member for Nassau Village and South Beach and them, what's your mission? When I was in high school, I was fighting for independence of the Bahamas. 1969, I could remember refusing to stand up for God Save the Queen in the movies. In the Shorter Street Theater, they used to play God Save the Queen before the movie started. And, Sean McQueenie was on Clifford Park burning the British flag. And the big argument when I was in high school was, do you really think the Bahamas can be an independent country? Some said yes, some said no. And now 50 years, it's all academic. These younger people don't even think of it as an argument. So now the next point is, should you still have the monarchy? And what the visitors brought is that issue to the fore. But still, there isn't, it doesn't excite the generation the way independence excited us. I mean, it's just a throw-off argument. But, you know, really, nobody's quite enthralled by the argument of fighting for it. That's why I was saying to you, while you're in this mood, let's pass the act now and then see if we can keep together long enough to get the 51% plus 50% plus one in the population before your fellas get to you and say, "No, don't fool with that." And then the next thing you know, you're telling us to vote their conscience. You know.
The question is if you have supported cabinet. That would be a question.
No, well, I take care of my fellas. No, I take care of my fellas, but you you take care of yours. Can you keep them together? You know.
Do you have supported cabinet?
I tell you, you heard the Prime Minister say, I was repeating what he said. You take care of your fellas. We'll take care of us. Right? That's what he said. Let me tell you what he said. I never, no, sir. I don't, no, sir. I never speak out of turn. No matter what they tell you, I never speak out of turn. But, so, the other thing I was going to say, you were talking about, the member for Fort Charlotte was talking about Robert Love, who he said came out of St. Agnes and ultimately ended up in Jamaica. But in talking to Americans, particularly in and around our independence celebrations, because I often go to Miami, and I've said the St. Agnes Church in Miami, for example, is, I call it the center of Bahamian culture in South Florida. It was founded in 1898 by a woman, a washerwoman, from St. Agnes, the congregation here in Nassau. And she was in a home in Florida, white home in Florida. And she was singing the hymn, "The Church is One Foundation." So there was an Englishman there and asked her, well, where'd she learn the hymn? And she said, well, this is what we sing in our church in Nassau. But there's no church for us to go to because of the discrimination. And so St. Agnes was founded. St. Agnes in Miami was founded out of that in 1898. And there are about 3,000 active members of St. Agnes congregation. It's now led by a man from Grand Bahama, Father Denrick Rowe. There's a congregation in Coconut Grove. There's also a congregation in Delray Beach, St. Matthew's, which was founded by people who moved from the Bahamas, from St. Matthew's Parish here in Nassau. So there are all these Bahamian connections in many places. New York has a Nassau Bahamas Association. Because of the fact of the British Council not taking care of their needs, back in 1909 or so, they formed this Nassau Bahamas Association. Later, in 1937, they purchased a building in Harlem at 137th Street, which building we still own today. And the government is committed to helping them refurbish the building. And in these Bahamian connections, I was saying to the U.S. Charge yesterday that what may be not a very well-known fact, that W.B. Du Bois, who is the famous member of founder of the NAACP, sorry, yeah, that's it, and who wrote The Souls of Black Folks. His ancestry is actually in Rum Key, and it's Long Key, sorry. So he, in his autobiography, writes about how he came to Long Key to see where his ancestors came from. So, and we all know the story of James Weldon Johnson. I mean, I was a student at James Weldon Johnson, who did God's Trombones. So I went to university. My first degree is in literature, and I remember reading Zora Neale Hurston's book, Their Eyes Are Watching God. And in the book, she's describing a group called the Saws. And I kept wondering, I said, this looks, because it's Florida, and and it turns out the Saws were what they called in Eatonville called people who came from Nassau, who were called the Saws. And James Weldon Johnson, of course, is a Bahamian. He was left land, part of his estate at South Street and West Street. He left a piece of land when he died in and around 1938. His estate is probated here. The will, you can go see it in the registry here. So we have all these connections of people who have done well. You've named all the basketball players and how they fired the imagination. I took hosted the basketball players at Doris Johnson after they had gotten tossed out of the tournament over there, and the Anglican Church in Freeport lent the bus to us and took them on a tour. So I told them, well, go to Lucayan National Park and go to Garden of the Groves and all the rest of it. So about mid-afternoon, I called up and said, where are you? And they said, we're in 8 Mile Rock. And I said, well, what are you doing in 8 Mile Rock? And they said, well, the boys wanted to see where Buddy Hield played basketball. So this fires their imagination. And that's why people are successful. You have Rick Fox and, Sidney Poitier before them, and Michael Thompson, and then Andre Ayton, who's there. Yes, Mr. Locker. So, and we want to, because the country does well by people who are successful. And I'm not so worried. People keep talking about this brain drain that we have. And I said to them that I've said to even the youngsters, is wherever Bahamians are, we have been trained, it's been inculcated in us to put a hand back to people who are at home. So you have men like Fred Papal and Lyndon Rose, who are successful. Chris Brown, who is doing quite well. But they always reach back. Sidney Poitier himself reached back. I mean, the support that he gave to Prince William High School when his film Buck and the Preacher Man had its world debut in the Bahamas, first shown at the Shirley Street Theater here, and the proceeds for the opening went to Prince William High School. So Bahamians did all of that. Someone was talking about the Dundas. Dundas needs $100,000 right now because the roof is in bad repair, needs to get up and going. If you've ever been to Green Turtle Key, I haven't been there since the hurricane, but you know they had that garden there with all of the heroes.
Alton Lowe.
Sorry? Yes, it may have been Alton Lowe's effort, but there's this garden and it's got all the people that they consider to be heroes. It's got busts of them throughout there. So clearly, this is a matter which Bahamians have been thinking about, and this process of the awards and the bill is really designed to put that in some kind of official basis. You spoke about the judiciary and the police getting these awards. One of the things is, you know, that yes, but I was going to say, again, this is what the act was trying to do, is to mirror the British awards. So you have a civil division and you have a military division. So you wanted to have some things which are set aside for the military, the police and the defense force. Also, in our work in the advisory committee, the way we came up with this was that certain of the awards should be reserved as a result of your office. So if you become a judge, if you become the Chief Justice, if you retire as a member of Parliament, it used to be the tradition, it seems to have fallen away, that retired members of Parliament got an MBE almost as a matter of course, as a mark of the service or the work that you did. So if you look back, you'll see that most of former members of Parliament who retired got MBEs or OBEs. I've forgotten which it is. The Bravery Medal, I was particularly interested in that one because there is an officer named Sergeant Marinard, who I've forgotten his first name, who's now retired. He lives in Grand Bahama. And, sorry? Yes, Michelet Marinard, Sergeant Michelet Marinard.
Yeah.
He was the officer who was the aide-de-camp and security man for the ambassador to Haiti, who was then Dr. Eugene Nuri. And he was going through Cité Soleil with Mrs. Nuri and fended off an attack. Mrs. Nuri was actually injured in the attack, was shot in the attack. And he too was engaged in the attack and I think may have been injured as well. And I wanted from that day to find a mechanism to give this award of bravery. I think we did an award from the Foreign Service, but I thought that there ought to be a more general way to do this. Unfortunately, because of the way the lacuna in the Act, which you're now seeking to rectify, that was not possible. So I'm hoping that the advisory committee is in a position to advise the Prime Minister with regard to that particular award. Other than that, it appears to me that there is a unanimity of interest and support for this business that we've done today, which, as I say, is an exercise in statecraft. It takes the project farther along. There's obviously more work to do. I hope that we continue along this journey. Father Sebastian Campbell will be happy that we've taken it one step farther, but not far enough. And you know, as Martin Luther King said, well, I may not get there with you, but you know, one day we're gonna get there. Long Island talked about the people from Long Island, and I just remember at the funeral of J.B. Carroll, we had in fact made a kind of promise that instead of, you know, all these roads in these islands are called the Queen's Highway. And I remember Ian getting up and saying, you know, what we need to do is to change the road in Long Island to the J.B. Carroll Highway. I thought that was a good idea. So it's things like that, and I think we'll get there. So I think that covers everything that was raised. Yeah, if you can find the 100,000 leader of the opposition to the Dundas, I'm sure they could use it. I'm sorry?
For all of your members who have disparaged the creatives in here, they should make a contribution to.
Is that penance?
Penance.
I see, that's what it is. Okay. But I heard you have connections, so I was just putting it out there. Tell Philip Burrows. Yeah. I wanted to also say, since the member for Fort Charlotte had mentioned Marcus Garvey, that the Bahamas government has signed on to a petition asking the United States government and president to formally pardon Marcus Garvey as a result of that conviction in the United States. That was it is widely believed that the cases were politically inspired and concocted, and the decision should be set aside. So we are part of that, as we are also part of the CARICOM effort on reparations, because that's a question which was asked of me.
Why not use the opportunity to educate the public on all of those storms?
What is that?
So, I mean, we're signing off without the public being aware and educated on the value of making that decision. I think you should use an opportunity.
Yeah, perhaps so. Well, we know the figure of Marcus Garvey and his role in the upliftment of people of African descent. No, I understand. So I'm just going to add this quickly. And he was convicted as a result of his political work in the United States. He was convicted on something called mail fraud. When you read the transcripts of the trial, it is clear that these were, it appears to us, concocted cases with unreliable evidence, which was really designed to discredit him as a result of his political work. As a result of that, he was deported from the United States and, of course, died in Jamaica and could never return to the United States, even though he had, family ties, business ties, social and cultural ties. And it has always rankled as an injustice. Now, this may seem kind of pyrrhic, but it is important to families for this to be done. And CARICOM, led largely by former Prime Minister P.J. Patterson of Jamaica, has been engaged in trying to get, along with people in the United States, the President of the United States to issue a posthumous pardon to clear the record, so to speak. The Pope did a similar thing for Leonardo da Vinci, who they imprisoned because he refused to say that the sun goes around the earth instead of the other way around, which as what is his name? DeGrasse Tyson says that Tyson. Yeah, right. He says the one thing about science is whether you believe it or not, it's still true. So we now know that the Earth goes around the sun, not the other way around. Da Vinci had discovered that years ago, but it wasn't until 500 years after his death that the Catholic Church said, sorry, we shouldn't have done it. But so it makes a difference to families. And so the same thing we're saying with Marcus Garvey is that we hope the United States president exercises his authority to pardon Marcus Garvey after the fact. And the other issue was the second thing we raised to Marcus Garvey had raised, the reparations issue. CARICOM, maybe 5-6 years ago, as far back as 10 years ago. Right, had a right. So CARICOM has been on this mission for some time. They've in fact been trying to raise monies to bring a case in the British courts. Lawyers were in fact contracted by the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. CARICOM made the decision that each country would form reparations committees. You know that you have a reparations committee here. The chair of that committee is the daughter of the former president of the Senate, I believe. And she remains we've had meetings with her, she remains the chair, and they're doing their work. So the press was trying to get me involved in, do you support what they say in demonstrations? I told them, this is a free country. The Reparations Committee speaks for itself. It's an independent body, but we are part of the CARICOM thrust on reparations. And so that's something which is ongoing.
Living evidence of why it's necessary.
Yes, we need a lot of public education because it's not a phenomenon which is understood. But for example, Georgetown University, as you know, got its foundations, buildings, endowment off slave labor. And they have, as a result of that, put in place a program to offer scholarships to African American students as a form of reparations for accepting the immorality of slavery. So these are ongoing matters, and I thank you all for raising them. I do want to once again Right, I did see that, yes. It's a current topic because, of course, of the visit of the couple around the Caribbean, and it has been raised in every jurisdiction that they've gone to so far, Belize, Jamaica, and here. I do want to, before sitting down, though, once again, thank Reverend Sebastian Campbell for his work on the National Heroes Day Committee, who turned, I started it as a political exercise for promoting my ideas in my own campaign. But I realized that if it was going to be successful, you needed a neutral figure or to promote the idea because it was worth it beyond my own political ambitions. And he took it and ran with it. And also, I wanted to thank Terrence Bethel, who is now sadly passed away, but he was at every step of the way part of this project with so many others. I mentioned Loretta Butler Turner. There was Code Smith, Freddie Mannix Jr., Reverend C.B. Moss. At one point, I even had you out there with me, right? So I think it's been a good journey so far. We've got, as the poet says, the forest road is dark and deep, and we have promises to keep and miles to go before we sleep. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the National Honors Act 2016. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to amend the National Honors Act 2016.
For the second reading of bills?
For the second readings, Madam Speaker, I now move that the House resolves itself into the whole.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that this House do now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with the Deputy Speaker in the chair and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole in the chair. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will rise. The motion is carried. The House will now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with the Deputy Speaker and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole in the chair.
Okay. Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the third reading and passing. Sorry, for the long title, Raymond Mackey Pension Bill be agreed.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
Second.
It has
Yeah,
been
Reverend
moved and
Mack.
seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those who are opposed will stand. The long title is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the short title be agreed.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
Okay, hold on. It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those who are opposed will stand. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move now that the second section of the bill be agreed.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that section 2 of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Section 2 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that section 3 of the bill be agreed.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The motion is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
1 second. It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will rise. The bill in its entirety is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I now move that the Mary Mitchell long title be agreed. The Mary Mitchell Pension Bill, a bill for an act to provide for the continuous service and the public service of Mary Mitchell, 2022 be agreed.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move for Section 2 of the bill be agreed. Second.
It has been moved and seconded that Section 2 of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those who are opposed will stand. Section 2 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. It has been moved and seconded as the bill in its entirety is agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The bill in its entirety is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the Japhet, Edison, Delaveau long title be agreed.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill is agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill is agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will rise. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that Section 2 of the bill be agreed.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the Section 2 of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will rise. Section 2 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that Section 3 of the bill be agreed.
Second. It has been moved and seconded that Section 3 of the bill is agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will rise. Section 3 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
Seconded. It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will rise. The bill in its entirety is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the Tellers Bethel Pension Bill long title be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill is agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the short title be agreed.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that Section 2 of the bill be agreed.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that Section 2 of the bill is agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will rise. Section 2 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that Section 3 of the bill be agreed.
Is there a Section 3. Section 3. It has been moved and seconded that Section 3 be agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will rise. Section 3 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the Tellers Bethel pension bill be agreed in its entirety.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety is agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will rise. The bill in its entirety is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the National Honors Amendment Bill, long title, be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will rise. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will rise. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that Sections 2 to 6 be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that Section 2 through 6 be agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will rise. Section 2 through 6 is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that Section 7 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
Section 7.
7.
It has been moved and seconded that Section 7 of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will rise. Section 7 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I have a new clause 8. So I'd like to move the following. Insert a new clause 8. Section 7 of the Principal Act is amended by the insertion of a subsection 5 to provide the following. Notwithstanding Section 1, where any honor or award. Shall I start again? Insert a new clause 8 in the bill. Sections to read as follows. Section 7 of the Principal Act is amended by the insertion of subsection 5 to provide the following. Notwithstanding subsection 1, where any honor or award is to be conferred upon the Governor General, such honor or award shall be conferred upon the Governor General by the Chief Justice. I so move.
Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the documents to lie on the. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Oh. It has been moved and seconded that the bill be amended as read. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The amendment is agreed. Excuse me.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the bill in its entirety be agreed, as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has, oh, which bill is that? It has been moved and seconded that this bill in its entirety is, as amended, be agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion in its entirety is agreed. The bill in its entirety is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the Speaker, Madam Speaker, will take the chair.
Is there a seconder? It's been moved and seconded that the Speaker of the House take the chair. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will rise. The Speaker will now take the chair. Yeah. Oh. Madam Speaker, I beg leave to report that the Committee of the Whole has examined several bills having made amendments thereto.
Honorable members, the Deputy Speaker and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole has reported that the committee has examined the bill, having made amendments thereto. Third reading and passing of bills.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the third reading and passing of the Raymond Mackey Pension Bill 2022.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those that are opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to provide for the continued service in the public service of Raymond Mackey.
Ordered that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be a bill for an act to provide the continuous, what is that? You gotta pass these to me quickly. Raymond Mackey Pension Act 2022 and shall be constructed in accordance with the Pension Act, Chapter 83. Further third reading of bills.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the third reading and passing of the bill, Mary Mitchell Pensions Bill 2022.
Second.
Thank you, Honourable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. This one there? As many are in favor remains. A bill for now. Mary Mitchell Pensions Bill 2022. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to provide for the continuous service in the public service of Mary Mitchell.
Ordered that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Mary Mitchell Pension Act Bill 2022. Further third readings.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the third reading and passing of the bill, Chapter Edison Delaveau Pension Bill 2022.
Second.
Thank you, Honourable Member. It's been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. Japhet Edison Delaveau Pension 2022. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to provide for the continuous service in the public service of Japhet Edison Delaveau.
Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof be declared to be Japhet Edison Delaveau Pension 2022. Further third reading and passing.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the third reading and passing of the bill, Telus Bethel Pension Bill 2022.
Thank you, Honorable. Is there a second? Second. It is removed and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. Telus Bethel Pension 2022. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to provide for a pension for Telus Bethel, retired Commodore of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force.
Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Telus Bethel Pension 2022. For the third reading.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the third reading and passing of the National Honors Amendment Bill 2022.
Is there a seconder? Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. National Honors Amendment 2022. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to amend the National Honors Act 2016.
Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be National Honors Amendment 2022. Further third reading of bills? No further third reading. Order that the clerk do take the bills passed by this House today to the Honorable Senate for their deliberation and to desire their concurrence. Adjournment? Oh, sorry, I will go down. Consideration, I'm ready for adjournment. Consideration of Senate's amendments? Resolutions? Member statements? Appointment to select committees? Instructions to select committee? Discharge of select committees? Notices for future meetings?
Madam Speaker, just wish to renew our notice in the name of the government.
Thank you. Adjournment?
Madam Speaker, I now move that the House stands adjourned to Wednesday, March 30th at 10 a.m.
Is there a seconder? Second. It has been moved and seconded that the House at its rising to adjourn to Wednesday, March 30th, 2022 at 10 a.m. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Final adjournment?
Madam Speaker, I now move that the House adjourns to March 30th, 2022 at 10 a.m.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the House do now adjourn. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The House stands adjourned to Wednesday, 30th of March, 2022 at 10 a.m.
Good job.
Oh, thank you so much, man.
That was good. Thank you. Very well.